All right, my dudes, we are live with another Pangburn Hangout. Today is Captain Jack Killian, who I believe was the first ever guy to pop in and have a conversation with me back in the StreamYard days.
If it wasn't,
Now you have your own program, dude. It's Tuesdays with Captain Jack, the Or Not Show. Well, it's all yours, Jack. Rock and roll.
oh man, yeah, no, how's it going, everybody? Yeah, like Trav was saying, I've been here almost, if not since the very beginning, since right after. Was it a couple years, took a little hiatus for a bit, came back, running the show. The Or Not Show is something I'm going to run, like he said, every Tuesday, generally at about 5 p.m. It'll cover any preposition that can be hit with an or not. So we're going to cover a whole bunch of stuff, from stuff like this, is cloning ethical or not, like the topic today. And then we're going to be talking about, can Superman beat the Flash in a game of chess, which has been shown in the comics, and then you can extrapolate or not. And then at the end of every one of those, it'll be a different kind of preposition. So that's super exciting. Today's topic is just on the ethics of cloning, specifically therapeutic and reproductive cloning. I want to talk about reproductive cloning first, and talk about therapeutic cloning. I want to get the general, consensus around the room about how everybody feels about it after I give out my points. So, reproductive cloning, as far as I've been able to take looks into it and study it, there's a really amazing YouTube video done by American History Geek that you can check out. Really, 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 really good video. Explains the entire history of cloning, at least from when the act of cloning began. Let's see. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the idea of creating a clone. I can't see how anybody would be upset. I have read a few of the detracting statements, so let's see what those were really, really, really best arguments against. Where are the my goodness gracious. There we go. So, at least for a lot of people, people have concerns that if cloning humans completely, that the idea of inserting those clones into people's families would cause people some mental harm. So I could see, I guess, from a psychological standpoint, people don't think that having fully grown people that may have passed or that are, laboratory babies, is it wouldn't they don't think that it would integrate the same. They would integrate the same as a regular person to a home, which I don't see why they wouldn't. That doesn't really hold water to me very much. But, can't really imagine why that would hold anybody back. I know a lot of religious groups tend to be divided on it. A lot of them see that playing, is like playing God, being able to engineer people in a way. So I can see the argument with that, but I actually have a counter argument for theists from that one perspective. If the idea is to get closer to God in this case, in whatever way you want to be closer to God in your feelings, or you want to understand him more, or feel his touch, or be one like him, or as close to him as you can be, being able to create or manipulate life would be one of the ways that you would feel probably closer to your God than any other, by doing the same thing or something similar that he did, which just kind of only goes to show, at least from my perspective, that you would want that. You would want that ability to be closer and feel more kinship with your creator. But that's just one argument I have for the theist side of things. Let's see, I've got a couple of things that don't have to do with religion also, on some of the merits of why it shouldn't be done or why it's immoral. There's a man named Tanner Kristoff. In 2006, he wrote a paper, "Thou Shalt Not Clone." I'm going to put the links down for all of my sources here in the or in the online chat right here. Copy those. Paste. Live text. Got every single one of my sources set there, so you guys can take a look. I don't know how we're going to get this over to the YouTube channel, but we can do that. So, here. I want to ask, as it's pretty similar, so talking about specifically reproductive cloning, I've given a really brief overview of what I think. I can't imagine a reason at least from my mind, besides just what the critics have said of it, that it would be a bad thing. It doesn't work in my head for some reason, and it's exactly why I wanted to talk about why people think. Anybody want to get in? Pangburn, Lexicon, Grim? Thinking about specifically your thoughts on reproductive cloning and ethical.
I'll take first whack. What do you think about the fact that reproductive cloning significantly shortens lifespans?
I think that that's something that is going to be taken care of in the future. I don't think that everything I'm talking about doesn't necessarily have to happen this second or exactly as I'm talking about it. I think that when we're talking about whether it's ethical or not, you're right. Right now would be a terrible time, but in the future it becomes less of a problem. I think right now, as it is currently, the technology isn't there for it. So right now, doing that would probably be a bad thing. However,
What do you think about
overall when we actually are able to implement it that way?
what do you think about personalities estimated to come mainly from genetics and the rest from experience? You think
Well,
like there's an ethical
I
issue?
would give a pretty. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Do you think there's an ethical issue with that with when you're and I would be careful about what you're about to do with the devices on the old YouTube, just FYI. What do you think about someone's choice or personality, right? Almost like you're duplicating somebody's personality. So if you were a clone, we know that your personality is going to similarly line up to like you would a twin, right? But you
I would
were
go ahead. I would
you're
start
not,
to.
but you're not unique in the way twins would be. Do you think that would have emotional consequences to a
I don't think
clone?
so. I don't think it may have emotional consequences, but we don't know that person. So technically, anybody could have emotional consequences to how they were developed. It doesn't have to be somebody who was cloned. But when when it comes to is it how they would feel about it, and it's again anybody can feel that way just by being born that they're not unique or not special. When it comes to a twin type process, those are natural clones, damn near anyway. You can still call them clones based on genetics, even though they're not technically real clones of each other. But you can have twins, and it's been shown this way and the other way. It's been shown one way and vice versa that you can have twins grow up in two completely different places and have incredibly similar or incredibly different personalities. It's been shown to happen both ways. So just as much of that as a flip of the coin, it's just like that with natural birth. It's just that much of a flip of the coin whether or not that can happen. So I don't really find it to be an argument.
Jack, Kaylee Fisher in the YouTube chat says it is evolutionarily disadvantageous. Diversity is forced in most reproduction for a reason. Do you think there's potentially a diversity problem? I mean, my initial reaction to that is like, you are right, Kaylee. Like on a large scale, like evolution happens over a very very long period of time. Of course, there is microevolution, but even at a microevolution level, we're almost at the point where no real catastrophe is going to force humanity to change in any real significant way, and I mean that just in a very general sense. Of course, we can hypothesize certain things that could happen, like where we had to like go and start living subterranean lifestyles, but I think for the most part, with where we are in our engineering, I think humanity, I think that is something we would have to
I actually have a pretty decent answer for
yeah,
this.
yeah,
So
yeah, go ahead.
was it when it comes to asexual reproduction in animals, I think you've got a better case there, Kaylee. You're not entirely wrong at all. When animals have mass asexual reproduction, there is a decrease in genetic diversity, which decreases survivability. But that's why most asexual animals are also capable of having regular intercourse to produce babies. Komodo dragons being a good specific case. And the fact of the matter is, with them, when the conditions are fine, they don't really care about genetic diversity too much. The females tend to be more asexual. But when conditions become incredibly harsh, the same Komodo dragons will go out of their way to make sure that they mate so that there's greater genetic diversity between their babies so that they can have a greater chance of survival. So when it comes to an asexual reproduction, I think you're correct. But when it comes to us cloning and eventually genetically engineering, I don't think that that'll be a problem. Lexicon, your ideas on just reproductive cloning?
Morally and ethically, as far as like the act of cloning itself, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing wrong with it. But
Mm-hmm.
I would have some major concerns about how it could be used.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want people cloned based on their genetic profile for intent such as like, this guy's a really good soldier, let's make 100,000 of them.
No, exactly. I can see that happening. And so the only specifically with the soldier argument that I've gone through and heard, I don't think like even if cloning became viable and it was like super fast and we could age these people up and all that shit, which would take an incredible amount of science fiction like level technology gap to close in a small time. As it we have drones and we have robots that we've been building. I think that we'd go that route first when it came to expendable things. We wouldn't clone 10,000 people to go fight when we could send 10,000 drones at a quarter of the cost.
I agree with that, like the robots are better than people argument, but the problem I see is humans have been known to do this in the past, not with cloning, but so breeding an entire generation with the intent to one day have soldiers.
Okay, okay, so I could see that when people in charge of the cloning process should take a really good look at people's motivations and what they are trying to specifically breed in or out.
Here's an interesting question maybe for this.
Okay.
Are we going to allow people, let's say if cloning becomes like, if you spend enough money, you can essentially get anything created or cloned. Are we going to allow like people, and let's just assume this is possible, but you know, Catherine Zeta-Jones in her prime, you know, we're talking like Mask of Zorro 1 days, make an exact clone of her, and the purpose of cloning her is to be your wife. Like, now what happens if you clone this person and then they all of a sudden they're like, but I don't want to be that. Can someone own a clone as property?
At that point, I would go ahead and say no, because I would think if we're creating a clone as like a fully, you know, all the way to a human being, and it's going to be a person and not, you know, we're not stopping it at the blastocyst level to harvest cells from it.
Right.
If we're growing it for the purpose of being a human, it has all of the same human rights that any government.
And here's another question. Let's say grieving parents, let's say their 14-year-old child commits suicide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can those grieving parents bring their child back to life?
I think that would require an extraordinarily intense set of therapy sessions to see if they could even handle that, because grief would immediately say, yes, bring my child back. And that's an understandable fucking feeling from anybody. I wouldn't put that past anybody to want to feel that way. However, as soon as this giant truck... Sorry about that. Was it once... Stupid truck. However, was it what was the exact topic again? We were saying I got distracted by that damn truck.
I was saying, you know, if a 14-year-old child commits suicide and then the parents are able to hand over the hairbrush and say, we want our child back.
Yeah.
And then maybe they bring the child back and then they still have this inclination to want to end their life. I mean, how many times do we allow this? Do we have like a one-time refresh rule or what?
Okay, so I think that how it would have to work is you'd have to take massive therapy sessions to see if you could even mentally handle that. If you could mentally handle it, and you know you were cleared at least by a therapist and some sort of like grounds that they would have to come up with to clear you. I believe that at that point you could revive your son. However, I think in the case of suicide, I don't think it would be allowed, just because whether it was on purpose or not, the conditions that you put your child in led them to kill themselves. And unfortunately, that shows to me that you're not fit enough of a parent for us to do that. So, like, it's not. It might not have been your fault, but you didn't look at the signs. Whatever it was, your kid killed them. I don't think that bringing them back in that situation where they'd want to kill themselves again would be safe.
It looks like we have a new person, Jack. Jordan Forrest.
Is it?
Welcome,
Jordan.
Jordan.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, guys?
How's it going?
I have a interesting question and a comment. This might be controversial, but that's the fun of it, right?
I don't know if
I think the main issue with cloning is that it would be very hard to even come up, at least for me, it might not be hard at all, to come up with any argument for why clones should have rights at all. Because for this very important reason, the clone is not, if you brought that 14-year-old back, the clone is not the 14-year-old. It is a perfect copy. And I think human beings are so ignorant that we will not be able to make a distinction, because for practicality's sake, we'll say, well, if they're so perfect to be indistinguishable, we could prove it using science. And since there's no such thing as a soul, which I would agree, then we're just going to basically say, for practicality's sake, they're the same person. And we're going to be permanently delusional because they're not the same person.
Well,
They're
did you
just
not
the same
hear?
person.
Did you not hear the word you used? You said for practicality's sake. You didn't say for. We're not thinking about it in the terms of reality. There, we're thinking about it in terms of practicality. That doesn't mean we're losing anything in our actual understanding of it. That means we're treating it as if it was that, regardless. That doesn't mean we have a lack of understanding.
So wouldn't, when it comes to intent with cloning or not cloning, would you say that wouldn't the issue arise as ethical agents?
Was that you? The
Post
wouldn't
property.
What? Sorry.
If we see clones as agents worthy of ethical dispute,
Why wouldn't we see them as agents worthy of ethical dispute? They're people.
How are they people if they are essentially cloned?
Why would they not be? What about them being cloned makes them not people?
Well, if we're cloning a person that already exists, I wouldn't call them a person. But if we're using cloning to give birth to a person,
let's say just for instance, we're going to do a quick hypothetical / thought experiment. Let's say a gorilla learned how to talk to people in an abstract and correct way, then it could discuss insane ideas that it pretty much had a person level a human level amount of communication via sign language, incredibly responsive, quick timing. If that were the case, we would consider that, with that level of communication, we would start to consider that a person. We would start to give them agency because they have the ability to ask for what they want and respond to, life in the way that we, in conversation, the way that we are. So I think that a clone, being a human being and capable of all of that, would having sapience just like anybody else. I don't think the circumstances of how they came about is really relevant when they exist that way.
I agree in terms of practicality, but if it's just in terms of practicality, then I would say then there's no ethical decision to be made. Like if it's practical, because I agree with the ape example, I would treat it as a person. But if someone said, well, is it really a person? I'm like, well, for practicality's sake, yeah, just to be safe. But if you ask me, do I actually believe that it deserves some kind of ethics or some kind of rights, I would just say, I have no clue and I don't care, because I have no idea what we're talking about beyond practicality, which means it's irrelevant.
Oh, sorry. Was that what you were saying? Did you have anything more?
Oh, no, that was it. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I felt like I cut you off there. Sorry. Was it, I think that the second that you, at least, the second that this, in the gorilla example, the second that you have that level of communication and you treat it as if it was a person, you might as well continue with it on. There's no reason not to. It has the ability to yeah, again, like, honestly, I just keep repeating myself because of having the ability to communicate the way that it does in this instance. It would be able to ask for things. It would be able to ask for rights. And why would you deny rights to something when it has the ability to question, ask, and understand what's going on with it? That would be cruel.
I I agree. I think I guess my issue is sort of perhaps a meta ethical one, I guess. It's like, should ethics be allowed for things that possess agency just because it would be cruel not to, even if we don't have a sense of truth beyond practicality? I think my answer would be no.
That's a very long question. I mean, and that may be what your answer is, and I can't, if that's what your answer is, that's what your answer is. I'd just like to put out to it that, yeah, again, it could be, any animal. If that situation were to happen, at least to me, I would immediately advocate for that gorilla's right to do what it wanted to do, let it go where it wanted to go, and pursue what it wanted to pursue, because it would have that's just how I would feel about it if that were the case. And I don't see a difference between an animal being able to learn to do that and then us treating it as if it was human, and us creating an animal that is human and has the same and would have the same rights as us. I just don't see the separation. I want to move on to Zetman. I haven't heard from him yet. What is your ideas, or what are your basic ideas on the ethics of the reproductive?
So regarding I haven't been here like before. I just came like kind of maybe 10 minutes, so I was aware for the cloning part. If that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So regarding the cloning thing, I find it very unethical, highly
Okay.
immoral, and highly problematic for many reasons.
Okay.
Just like our gentleman here had the initial thought that they wouldn't be considered as humans, this is what I would really bet on many people would think so as well, especially the people who have like different views on cloned people are. There's a movie actually I think you all are familiar with where basically they do the same thing where they clone people, put them in a
I think you're thinking of The
place.
Island. Is it The
Yes,
Island?
no, it's not the island. It's somewhere in the desert, which basically they are basically cloned, but they need to somehow have some level of human, realistic interaction to actually mature. Then they kidnap those people or take them, and they try to harvest their organs for the real people. So this one,
I've got just a real quick aside, but no, but go ahead, continue if you're going on.
Sounds like The Island with Ewan McGregor.
yeah, it could be that movie, but it's just one aspect of it. Another aspect of it could be a thing that would even produce more disparity between people, because I don't think that everyone is capable of affording a clone to their sons, to their wives, to their mothers. So we'd see more people like withering because of their financial status, and more people are sustaining because of their having more money as well. This would be a societal problem in large scale, in my opinion. The same thing with the idea of like gene engineering your kid to be the perfect ideal, then you will get. Yeah, and also like there's another problem is that you would fundamentally should treat that clone as an individual different being, because even if we do it to twins, although they are like identical clones, but they still have to some extent different experiences, and they have different names, and they have sometimes different desires. Most of them align, but they still have some differences. So this is what I would stand like. I don't think it's a good thing.
Okay, so I want to start with the the movie thing that you're talking about, where they would go harvest these clones for organs. Now, this goes a little more into therapeutic cloning, which I want to talk about a little bit later. But it is not necessary whatsoever for a full human to be cloned for organs to be cloned. You can clone out of a very small amount of tissue any organ at all. And it does not need to be involved with a full human growing and taking it from them or extracting it. All it needs is good laboratory conditions, good technicians, people that handle it very skillfully, and you can have just about any organ grown without having any people hurt or involved. It's very, very easy to do that. The creation of a full clone for organs would be that would be unethical, 100%. So I don't disagree with you there. But there are ways to do that don't involve that whatsoever. Again, I'm going to raise to you the same example I raised to him about the ape with them being people. Oh, go ahead. What's up, Lexicon?
We already have therapeutic cloning for simple organs such as your esophagus and your bladder, and they're already in use in people. We're very close to being able to print livers. From what I understand, we can do the tissue, but we can't do the intravenous veins going through the tissue so that once it's implanted, it can. So it's purely just an engineering problem at this point of whether or not we can structure detailed blood vessels through the organ to make it functional when it's implanted into a person.
Interesting. So, so when it comes to specifically that point of the argument, Zetman, what do you think?
I think, like, just as I said, like, I see those as potential problems. I'm not really holding strong position whether this thing is actually going to happen. I don't think even cloning an entire human being is even feasible. Like, to just have their DNA and molecularly change the medium, and then we will have like a same point of view. I don't know if it's possible in any near time.
I don't mean to cut you off there. It is entirely possible. Since at the very least 2018 or 19, I'm not 100% sure. I have to double check. Was that they were capable of cloning capuchin monkeys. They cloned 2 of them successfully out of a group of, I think, 29. And they are still alive and growing to term. If we are capable, and this is very, very, this is out there and what's allowed to be known. If we're capable of capuchin monkeys being able to be grown in a lab, there is quite literally no reason we couldn't do a human. And even the doctor on that, which I don't know how to pronounce 100% correctly, but it's Dr. Poo or Poe, and he gave a statement saying that human cloning would not be done in any lab, at least in China.
I mean, if you wanna believe something that Dr. Pooh tells you, then go ahead.
Yeah, I don't. Unfortunately, that is his name. His name is Dr. Pooh or Poe. I don't know how to pronounce it exactly. I am not 100% sure, and I feel bad about it. But he did put out a statement. You can find it on the independent.co.uk Science News and all that. Is that there's no plan to clone humans based off of us being able to clone monkeys, because people recognize that we are so close in DNA. If you can clone monkeys, you can clone humans.
No, if that was the case, then I fully agree with you.
Right now
Actually,
is the level of viability in cloning humans. But sorry, what was that, Zetman?
no, then I would like concede to that point. Then yeah, I would say okay then. But it's again, it's not like a very crucial point in my view whether we can or can't, because I would still say yeah, it's viable, feasible in the future. So if it happened now, then hey, all the great then that we have achieved something nice. So, but still, like there are still some ethical problems with it, and that regards to like the identity of the individuals and the treatment of that individuals and how some people will treat it, because I personally would treat that individual as a real person with identity and whatever you want to call it, self-awareness, consciousness, and soul, if some people prefer that word to use as well. So yeah, I mean, I don't really see any other application that be highly incentivized for this thing to be mass produced in high scale, for them to be used for different reasons, like for the military or for hard risks tasks and missions like space explorations, deep sea exploration or mining, deep sea welding. Those things like could be very demanding, could be very risky, have a high mortality rate. You would see some entities and companies that could use this technology, whether it's publicly or unpublicly, whether it's being exposed or not, to actually clone people with real personalities, with real consciousness and stuff, and just mass produce them to use them for certain tasks because it's way easier for them.
Okay, so I would like to address that argument by an argument that I made again earlier. The amount of time, again, the scientific limitations on creating that many clones for a purpose like that, and then aging them up to the time that you need them to be, and then having them be able to be strong enough and smart enough to carry out those tasks. That's an incredible waste of money and time compared to creating some robots to do the same thing. Like you could create, we have the technology to create robots to do exactly all of that right now, and we don't have to worry about them coming to term. We don't have to worry about 25 years or 20 years before they're viable as full humans or anything like that. It'd be a waste of time and money.
The particular question would
Waste
be,
of time and money until when? Until like we achieve certain technological advancement, which it becomes very feasible and easy.
Can you say that one more time?
Like until it's waste of time and money until when exactly?
It's a waste of time and money always, because our robotics technology is so far ahead of our cloning technology that we will always be able to create cheaper and more effective robots than we will be able to grow clones.
I mean, like regarding for like,
One
I mean,
second.
one.
Lexicon had something you wanted to say real quick. What was that?
I just wanted to say it completely depends on the task involved. If the task is going to require creative thinking on the fly to maintain whatever it is you're doing, the question is do our algorithms achieve a level of creativity that could surpass that of a clone being used in such a field?
I think that we wouldn't need a clone. I think that there are enough people on the planet that are creative that we wouldn't need a clone. Oh shit.
Actually, so all this thing depends on what viable technologies we have and what things we have. So we like any counter argument, any argument we always give this, it always depends on some hypothetical assumptions that could be true, could be not true, and could be achieved, but maybe at a longer time. One thing, for example, that need to be done in deep space exploration is that this is an example, for example, where like robotics and AI may not be helpful because like of the amount of training or the common sense and the reasoning that we do have and the intuition that actually built for many years. Those things can be trained for clones, for humans, that we still don't have the capacity. And even many people with the AI's knowledge, they think that we're so far away from this thing. So I would say that cloning an individual and make them understand a task would be even Sorry? Hold on. Yeah. Would be even faster and more efficient, and actually would be even more and could be more beneficial and give more output for like things that requires an independent entity to achieve a certain task, like in deep space exploration, where the high latency we can't really communicate with the robotic too well. When it comes to the AI, we can't train AI for all possible scenarios, and maybe we need to train them all over. Even that AI technology is so far ahead. I think since you said we already clone people now, then cloning people now and teaching them now is already happened.
We have not cloned people. We can clone.
We can't clone, but we can't make the AI that we want to make to replace humans.
Okay, so hold on a second. I never said anything about these robots replacing humans in any regard. I don't know where that came from. I would say that instead of clones, robots would be used to do maybe mass labor jobs. If you're talking about a level of creativity that's needed inside of a job that would be used as like, a human being, we still do produce enough human beings to have creative people work in these positions that don't have to be cloned. Clones, in this case, would be made under very specific conditions. They would be made under what people who probably aren't capable of having children, people who are capable of having children, but they want, they want their child to be a specific way and they've got the money to pay for it. It's just, that's it. And I don't see, I can't imagine, like, where does the unethicalness come from in wanting to be able to design your child? Because the thing is I can see it from the other aspect. Like, think about it from the child's perspective, right? There is nothing more secure to them in their world knowing that their parents literally made them the way that they are. Like, they wanted them specifically and made them that way.
They can't control it.
How much more security could you have in your parents that not only were you just not an accident, you were totally 100% planned, and you were chosen to be as good as they could possibly get. Like, you're as much as intelligence as they could possibly give you. As many good looks as they could. From the child's perspective, wouldn't you think that wouldn't that be amazing? I can't see how they would, like, oh, I wasn't born the conventional way. I guess that's upsetting, but even then, people that are born the conventional way aren't necessarily wanted all the time. And you know what I mean? So people have to grow up and find out, oh yeah, well, instead of me wanting to be with your mother and like us having a child that we wanted to take care of and love forever, we were drunk one night, I slapped one in her and she didn't feel like getting an abortion. So here you are. You know what I mean? That's not a really fun way of knowing that you exist, but understanding that somebody literally picked you, somebody literally made you, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, made you in the natural sense, but made you in a lab or a factory for cloning people, which would be an entirely different story. Again,
I don't think it'd be a different story. Explain to me why it would be a different story.
Absolutely. So again, we do have certain things when it comes to, for example, adoptions. Like I don't have the exact like the maybe the people testimonies or like the psychological research regarding like parents and their relationship with the adopted child. It's still there's still this missing biological link between the parents and an adopted child. Even in nature, when you see other animals adopt like other people's offspring and child, they still don't treat it the same as it's your own biological child. This is one thing. Not to like down talk on like adopted kids or anything. It just would this thing be more amplified with cloning people? Absolutely. Would this thing decrease the value of the human of the human being? Absolutely, it will, because it will be easily made and easily replaceable. And with those things, you can't just sit and think that humans, with their all benevolence, will take this chance and use it for the greater good and for achieving a happy family that lost their kid and stuff. Those things would be justified, but to a large extent, when this technology become more easily and more accessible, you'll find more people would use these things to do illegal stuff, to abuse them and take them to a more dangerous risk missions, like for example in deep space exploration, where many people, rational people, may not take the chance to do those things. They would have an increased risk of dying. Maybe those same companies would manufacture clones, make those educate those clones, indoctrinate those clones, make them believe that they have a sense of goal or mission to whatever thing is, like many people had, and those people would be abused immorally in any sense, and they will be fucked because they don't have any other presence. This is how like easy it can go wrong.
Can I interject there?
Sure, go ahead.
People have been doing that with real children for forever, right?
That's not an argument, because
No,
this would
it is
quantified.
no, hold on a second. Let me finish. I let you go on for a good minute. Let me finish.
You asked me a question.
It was a rhetorical question.
Yeah, okay, I did not get the rhetorical question. Sorry.
I apologize that you didn't understand that. So, when talking about that, okay, I'm not seeing where your thought process is coming from on this.
Okay, imagine this, okay? With the snap of a finger, you can produce a human being.
Okay,
I made a human being. With the snap of a finger, I
I've
can
got a
delete.
problem.
No, hold on. You asked me a question again, so I'm giving you an answer. So,
how long is it going?
Sorry?
How long is the answer going to be? Because every answer should be pretty succinct. If you go on for another paragraph or so, we can't really have a dialogue, because then I've got to talk about everything you said in your paragraph. So if we could keep the answers like a little more succinct so that we can talk, that'd be great.
Oh, absolutely. I would try. So I'll try my best. So a lot of the value that the human being has, it's very cultural, very traditions, very ideological that we have now. And to change this dramatically would basically challenge our views on those individuals, on how we approach those things. Making those clones easier and accessible in a way that basically by giving an order, giving a hair sample of your mothers and fathers, will make a production of a clone very easy. This can be abused in many ways. This will basically change how people will view themselves as clones and as a people that we have other relationships with other clones. This is why it's a problem, because it is unusual and it can be very easily exploited by people who are not really have the best intention of the world. And there's real application where this cloning thing can be used for like exploiting nature and things where normal rational human would not really go for.
Okay, so I don't think that there's a difference between a clone and a normal rational human. I don't know where the disparity there would be. But
indoctrination experience.
I'm not okay. So I didn't ask you a question there, and I just let you go on for a couple sentences. So please allow me to finish what I'm saying. Thank you. Was it I don't think that disparity would be there in the first place. Also, when it comes to how they would act socially, there's no way that anyone could predict how clones would act socially besides what they're just guessing. Secondly, or thirdly, my bad, is it the idea that shit. So you go on for about just a paragraph too long, and I can't remember all of your points. Is it let's what was the very first point that you made? Oh, the snap of a finger. You understand that incubating a human generally takes 9 months, like just on average for regular people. That doesn't change when it comes to cloning. It doesn't become faster because we're putting it in the laboratory. It still takes 9 months for a human to develop. It's going to be a very long time. I don't even know if we will ever have age accelerant technology like that to just age up a clone from 0 to whatever in a snap of a finger to make it viable for whatever you're trying to say that it would be viable for. You would take just as long,
Analogy it was.
just as long to gestate inside of whatever thing it was. It would take just as long, and it would take 20 years for it to become a human. Obviously, 5 years old, it's still, it's a 5-year-old. At 20 years old, it can finally, 21 years old, it can vote, do work, and all that fun stuff. But it still takes 21 years. So I don't think your snap of a finger analogy is viable whatsoever. It doesn't mean anything in this because you could never, at least as far as I can see in technology, just snap your fingers and full-grown a clone.
It wasn't the main point of my analogy. Sorry, maybe my analogy was really bad, but the main point of the analogy is the ease and accessibility of producing another human being. The snapping of the thing, it's not even it doesn't even exist in the sci-fi movie as well. Like maybe only in Rick and Morty actually. Even that wasn't a snap of. Yeah, even in Rick and Morty, it's not a snap of a finger. It's basically a device does take some seconds. Okay, so regardless of the point. The main point is the ease and accessibility of this technology that will make reproduction of human beings very easy and very quick on a mass scale, where you can do it on a mass scale. This will make this you will get more humans faster this way. So it's like an analogous way of snapping in a finger, because if you snap your finger every second, you get a human. You can do it 1,000 times, and it will take 9 months. It will be the same thing. The point is, you're reducing the value of the human being when it gets detached from its traditions and value, because it's easier and it has no parent.
What makes it easier? What makes it easier? Cloning is a lot more difficult than just having sex with somebody and making a baby, right?
Yeah, so far.
So okay, so we're talking about the far future when this is viable, like we were talking about. Okay, so if we're doing that, I think also in the far future, not only would we have systems in place to deal with this, but I don't think that clones are going to interact with each other the way that you think they are, and I don't think people are going to interact with clones the way that you think they are. And I think the reason is just because there's not going to be any way to distinguish. You're not going to be able to look at somebody and be like, that fucking clone. You know what I mean? You're never going to be able to do that. So I don't think any of these problems that you're talking about are even going to happen. Because you're like, what are you going to do besides go out of your way to double check if someone's a clone? And at that point, the problem's with you. You've got a problem with clones. It's not a problem with clones.
No, actually,
it's not a problem that you're freaking out and going, oh, I must discover if this person's a clone or not because my own reasons are leading me to this. Sounds like a personal problem that doesn't have anything to do with how clones or people would interact with each other.
No, trust me.
Clones are people, and we're only using the term clones for the type of conversation. Because otherwise, I would just be saying how people and people would interact, and you wouldn't be able to distinguish the difference because that's what they are. And we're only using clones as a placeholder to continue to have the conversation. See how easily that
I agree with you, and I think this will be an interesting discussion when this phenomenon actually may take place, where you have disparities and hate towards cloned people. I hope not. In fact, I'm very sympathetic for people who are getting cloned, because I actually want the best for them. And the reason why I say this is because it's very highly immoral. Is because first of all, why do people and partners make babies? Multitude of reasons. Many of them love their children. Some of them don't. Why entities or other people make clones? Some of them, they lost their relative other. Some of them lost their significant other. Some of them lost their child, kid, whatever. That's also a valid reason. This could be a reason I can condemn, because you will still have this relationship. You will still love them, but then you will still need to treat them as a new person if we don't have a memory transmitter or a conscious transmitter technology yet. Those things need to be treated. Those people need to be treated like new people. This is my rule, because I would love to give those people as much as agency and individuality as the original other. just not with the same memories, because they can't have it in this hypothetical realm. The other thing is, what will happen when other entities, corporations, and nations starts cloning people for other purposes? What would your argument then? What would we do to stand against it? Just like ban it out? And this is my crunch. This is my crux of the problem: is entities,
We can break these
individuals
down.
cloning people
We
for
can break
bad
these down as
reasons.
we go. We can't. If we're going to talk this, we got to break these down as we go because I can't remember everything you said. I'm actually having a hard time remembering the last 4 paragraphs, which I can't keep track of it. We got to break this down as we go along. So
The point was fair.
right,
Easy
no,
as well.
I'm not saying your point's wrong or anything like that. It's just that we got to. I can't remember half of it because you've been talking for so long in a line.
I don't think it was really that long, my
I
friend.
can't hear you, Jason, at all.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah, no, can't hear you. Was it okay, so if you could go back, because again that was really long, if you could go back and maybe chop that into like 3 sentences, 4 sentences for me.
Absolutely. Okay. The one thing, it is the reason of making clones compared to the reasons of making a baby with your partner. Those things may overlap in some aspects, and that is fine. But the other things is the reasons of corporates and other entities and nations that they may produce clones for militaristic reasons, for high-risk missions that the normal parents would not let their child go through, or they will not, or they may or may not be able to consolidate it with the other. And the other reason is the clone. Do they have a parent? Do they have a brother? Do they have some intimate relationship, like the unconditional love of a mother? Those clones may not have those things, and this could be a danger to them and an exploit to
people don't have that.
exploit those people. Lots of people do so, but
A
you
lot of
don't.
people don't have love. A lot of
But-
people don't have like parents that are there for them. People who are foster kids, people who have, their parents have died. There's all kinds of situations like that.
But
right?
you amplify it with those things.
Can I ask a quick question? Is this about religion with you?
No.
So, because I didn't understand the value, like why would a clone then not have of much value as another person?
Yeah.
Where
right.
where would the lack
No,
of
no.
value?
In my own views, they would have the same value, absolutely the same, but the same thing. But what I fear is the reactions of some nefarious people, nefarious entities, and corporates, maybe nations, that they will take this chance to clone as much as people as they can for whatever reasons and ill intent they do have. They could indoctrinate those clones. They could spit a
It's
faith.
not about
They
a
could spit
soul,
an
right?
ideology.
It's not about a
It's-
soul, right?
I mean, I treat soul and consciousness and identity and memories and characteristics all the same thing. The soul is just a catalyst to like combine many things together.
Would
But
the
like the
clone
main
have a
problem
soul?
is that if you have a soul, then the clone has a soul.
So the
Okay.
clone's conscious, then the clone has a soul, right?
Well, if you're conscious and you think you have a soul, then I would say the same thing for the clone. I see
Okay.
no differences between the clone and the human being, and this is why I have a highly immoral and unethical problem with the production of clones when it's used by corporates and entities,
Yeah.
because none of us will be able to guarantee it won't happen. Like, we already have child labor, slavery still around the world, it still happens, women trafficking, child trafficking, all these horrible things that would happen. Imagine what would be the ramifications and the traumatization of many cloned people would experience if they haven't been publicly known. This has many wide, heavy implications to like their safety and their mental safety. But like, we're not paying attention to those things because we think, oh, we're gonna be able to push back onto those things. Like, we couldn't even fight the child trafficking thing yet. We couldn't even end it yet. Slavery is not ended yet.
Okay. All right. Well, just very quickly. I don't see any concern with like I mean, obviously there are ethical issues with regards to cloning. Everybody knows that. That's been extensively discussed in scientific literature. But I just want to be clear that the rights of a clone, my perspective are the same as the rights of they're human. Like you can't clone somebody and say, I'm going to make you my slave because you've been cloned. That may have been their intention. They could do the same thing with children and say, I'm having a child for the intention for them to be my slave. But I see the rights bestowed upon conscious sentient beings. I don't see any difference between somebody who's cloned and somebody who's born naturally. They have the same human rights. And if somebody's like, I cloned this person and now they're going to be my wife because I cloned Catherine Zeta-Jones. I mean, can you do that to a kid? I mean, if you can do that to a kid,
You
if
can do
can't do that
good
to
with
Immediately
clones too.
unethical.
Why you have to
It
be
becomes
evil with
immediately
clones?
unethical
Why
the
can't you
second
do
that you
good with clones as
produce
well?
someone for that.
You can do good with clones too. Why it has to be evil?
I absolutely agree
Sure.
with you. Again, the problem is the ease and accessibility. If this technology would allow these problems to actually get amplified even more dramatically.
Do you think that something as intensive, like not only energy intensive, money intensive, and scientifically like knowledgeable intensive that cloning is, that it would be easy and cheap to achieve? Like even if we found some way to streamline the process, it still takes somebody that's a trained lab technician, or at least has that level of skill to be able to do that in the lab. You can't just it's not going to be like it's not going to be like base chemistry with like meth.
No, that's
somebody out of
only true if you're cloning for therapeutic reasons. If you're cloning for reproduction, that's a lot easier. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if in the future there are home use cloning kits for reproductive purposes.
I would say that would be incredibly power intensive and not practical.
Not at all. You only need the clone to grow to.
You would also need something that would be able to act as an artificial womb that would be capable
No,
of being
no, you don't.
house.
The reason I say that we're going to have home use cloning kits is because if you're cloning for reproduction, then you would not grow the clone to full baby sized in a test tube. You would actually grow them in a real womb. So all you need is a woman who's willing to have the cells put inside
there's
that
no
womb.
difference between this and in vitro fertilization. I'm not really buying it.
I mean,
I'm not
we
really
can't.
there's
In
no
America,
difference between that and in vitro, so I'm not really tripping.
Sorry, I didn't hear you there. What was that?
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Jason. There's no difference between that and in vitro to me, so I'm not really seeing where you're.
There's no difference between that and what?
In vitro fertilization.
What's that?
In vitro fertilization is quite literally taking fertilized eggs and putting them in the ovum of a woman for them to multiply and grow.
Yeah, so with cloning,
it's the same thing. You can do that today. So there's not even at-home clone kits. It's just literally you go to the doctor and have them do it for you.
If you're going to make a clone of yourself, then it wouldn't be you just take a sperm and put it in a woman. You would have to.
That's not what that is, and
you would have to create
take the sperm and put it in an egg.
Hold on, David. You'd have to create the cloned embryo of yourself first, and then you place the embryo inside a woman's womb.
Yeah, that wouldn't be too. I mean, we could do that, technically with in vitro fertilization. So I'm not seeing. We're already doing shit exactly like that right now. So I'm not seeing where you're.
Exactly, it's very easy.
But there's not going to be. I don't think an at-home cloning kit would be anything less than like supervised. There's no way that they would let people, especially lay people.
Yeah, how'd that work?
Of course they would.
I disagree wholeheartedly that they would let lay people.
Why is home cloning any different to any other form
I disagree because they could do because that would be incredibly unethical for lay people to just clone people in their home. Because they could take the DNA from anyone and start cloning them in their homes for unethical reasons. So they would be an unethical practice. They wouldn't let people.
That's by your standard of morality, but not everyone shares your morals.
You're 100% correct. Does anybody else think that if you could just clone people in your house and it wouldn't be regulated whatsoever, and you could take DNA from anyone and clone them for whatever purpose, that would be ethical? Anyone?
Hey man, I'm not saying there won't be laws about. Of course, there are going governments are going to make
like the majority of the people you're talking to don't
governments are of course going to make laws on the topic. Like the British government especially would make laws about it. They're very controlling. But that's not to say these kits will still exist. People will still be able to buy these kits and use them regardless of whether their use is legal or not.
Right. I 100% disagree that it's going to be as easy as you say it is. It would not only be unethical for it to be as easy as you say it is, but who would create the cloning kits to start dispersing them? That's insane.
And also, like, we haven't forgotten about the main reason. Well, not one of the main reasons, in my opinion, is that the reason behind cloning people. So when we have reproducing parents, doing reproduction, they do it for many reasons, and they have the right to do so. And we have the traditions and the cultures to give them the legitimacy and an authority to a certain extent. Then we sometimes even take the child away from them. But what happens? What's the reason then from cloning people? What if a husband lost his wife and he wanted to clone his wife, and he cloned his wife? Then wife didn't like him. Wife wanted to go somewhere else. This would be
She wouldn't be the
a
same
problem.
person. It's just like
I
she'd
mean-
have to be brought up the exact same way, but of all the same background. She wouldn't know who the fuck he was. Like she mightn't even like him.
In
If
America,
he hang on a minute. If he clones his wife, then he's going to have parental responsibilities because she's going to be a baby when she's born. So
And would be this ethical then to actually leave a husband who had an intersexual relationship and a different dynamic of relationship with his wife now that his wife is a baby to have the same relationships? I don't trust people. We don't know how this thing will pan out. It's a very risky situation. It's very highly unpredictable, and that's why I don't support it, because the
Can you
risks
say that again? You
and
lost
Maybe
me.
a something molester.
it could be, yeah.
Repeat
What-
that again.
what-
Can you
Yeah,
repeat that?
roll that back about 30 seconds.
Can you repeat that, please? You lost me.
So the reasons behind cloning individuals in the unconventional way is the reasons and the motives, and how would this be pan out in the future of those individuals. The same thing with the wife, if she died and her husband wanted to clone her. The reason why he cloned her, maybe because he wanted to save his wife and to live with her again, but this is not certain, and this is unpredictable. Again, why we want to clone people, other than some specific situations which is understandable, like cloning a dead child, where you still can make this child grow, you can be a parent to this child, and then after 18 you lose the responsibility of that child. This child is independent. But for other reasons, I can't find so many use to it. It's very highly specific reasons where cloning people is
Okay, hold on,
justified,
stop,
but the
stop.
applications is too wide and too risky, in my opinion.
You can make an army of
Oh,
yourself.
okay. It's kind of like Pet Cemetery.
Train
Right?
them.
Like you're getting back to what you've lost kind of argument is where you're coming from.
You feel like there's not a lesson being learned in losing something if someone can clone it and bring it back?
How's the relationship will pan out then?
I don't think it matters. I think that it would be.
I don't get his argument.
The situation was that the child died from an accident or something like that, just to freak. They were walking across the street, got hit by a car. I don't see why the parents wouldn't be able to clone them back to life if they wanted to.
Yeah, but
I
that wouldn't
think,
be the
I
same
think that's
person.
fine. I think that's an example.
The thing is that if
I don't get his argument
in
though.
this instance, if a child's going into an environment let's say that the child was beat to death, they're not going to be allowed to clone the kid back to have him. You know what I mean?
How does that work?
You know,
It's
they
like
wouldn't.
when you lose a
download
puppy, you get
the
another
hard
puppy.
drive.
You're not going to replace the puppy.
I would say that
it's
if
immoral to get another puppy.
cloning would be more regulated than regular birth was, because you can have a man.
replacing Scotty.
You can have a father beat down their
wrong?
child to death. Well, you can have a father beat their child down to death, and they can go and have another baby. Then there's nothing stopping them from having another baby. But if you were to have a child that beat your child to death, and you were like, I want an exact replica of this kid, to somebody who clones them, they'd go, no, you beat your child to death. There's more control in cloning than there is natural birth, and that's there's so many things that could be much worse in natural birth than cloning.
Everybody
Can I get a better
realizes
version of
that
him?
a clone is not, we say a replica of somebody else. Like as soon as that clone is born, they're exposed to social and environmental factors that make them a different person. They're going to look the same, they're going to have the same DNA, but they're going to grow up and they could be a totally different person.
Actually, I would argue that the moment they're put into the womb, they're exposed to different environmental factors, because it's probably not going to be the exact same womb that the
There's definitely going to be some severe similarities. They're going to be similar to the person. But
agreed.
There's going to be definitely like a good 30% of them that's not.
Agreed. Yeah, I totally agree. But I'm just making the point.
But
that,
he's saying the genetics isn't what makes a person the person. It's the environmental factors that makes a person the person.
It's both.
Yeah.
It's both. But my only point is one that people have this illusion that this is an exact replica of this person. They're going to be exactly like the other person.
You're right. It's a good point you made.
That's not the case. And the other thing is that it's a sentient being. with the, I mean, so if we're like, I cloned this person and now I have ownership of this person, or I'm going to decide what happens with this clone, they're all going to go to war for me. I mean, if you're going to do that with kids, okay. I mean, it's the same sense. They're conscious, sentient beings like that have rights. And, you know, I don't see any issue around that particular topic. Now, there's certainly ethical, you guys are bringing up a lot of good ethical issues, which I'm not sure how we get around some of those. And I think this is why many scientists are like, they reject the idea of cloning humans at this moment for a lot of these ethical issues. But I just want to be clear that from a scientific perspective, I don't see any issue with actually being able to clone a person.
You're so right, Jason Thorne. You're so right. You hit the ball out of the park. Because people are different based off of their environments in where they're not going to be a replica. So they're not the exact person.
Yeah. Thank you.
So in a way, there's no such thing as a clone, right?
Yeah, by clone, we just mean they will be genetically indistinguishable. That's not to say they won't develop
They'll be the same person.
Because they will be exposed to different hormones in the womb, and they will be exposed to different environments.
Their software programming is going to be different.
I wonder if we went back in time, like
the same, but the software is going to be different based off the genetic, based off the environmental differences.
If we went back in time, like 50 years, if people would be saying, "Oh my God, artificial insemination is the works of the devil," or in vitro fertilization, or test tube babies, or any of these things, I think there were lots of ethical questions around whether those are actually human beings. Is it a human if they're in a test tube and frozen, or if sperm is frozen? Is that an actual person that comes as a result of that? I feel like we're having that same discussion. Agreed, it's more complicated, but I think it's a similar kind of issue.
But so I think it's an argument of it
being worlds make the same person. You're saying it's not the same person.
Also, the reason why I think it's an important issue, and I think it's a good thing, because we're always developing and evolving definitions on how do we define a human being, an individual. And of course, this thing has evolved through time. The more we become aware, the more we become knowledgeable, the more we become educated. But like we also, with acquiring even more knowledge, we can even have a glimpse of a possible future that for those people who have been cloned, genetically cloned.
Zetman, I want to ask you a question. Quick question, Zetman. If I download your mind into another person's mind, is that person you? And if I clone another person that is identical to you, is that person more you? Get what I'm saying?
It's hard to answer that. It's hard to answer this question. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. It's very hard.
That goes to Jason's point.
Yeah, they're not.
Which I agree with, by the way. This is the reason why I made the problem with the husband who lost his wife and he wanted to clone his wife for a reason that this wife that would grow up in the future and be and remain his wife could be a problematic, because no one guarantees you that person that your wife will be the same wife that you once knew. And many people would have the same thought. This is only a hypothetical situation. We don't know. Those people couldn't even have the possibility to clone if someone died of natural death as well. Who knows?
Yeah, this is why I think that in the case of that happening, that it would require intensive therapy for I don't know how long to even know if you could stand to do that. And then you would also have to be faced with the reality that, let's say you do clone your wife back to life for some reason, you have to take the chance in that cloning that you bring her back in that version of her, and she doesn't love you or want to be your wife anymore.
Whoa, Howard, she can't be your wife. She's a baby.
Well, I mean, of course, in this case, we're talking about a hypothetical. They age her to whatever fucking age she was when she died or whatever.
Well, no, as soon as she's born, you're going to have to ask her consent if she wants to have 20 years of her life taken away so she can be made an adult.
You can ask a baby consent about anything. No, it's up to the person who's in charge of the baby. So let's not. That's a ridiculous start.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it won't be legal in any country to age your baby about.
What if we had the technology to make an exact...
There is no way a government would let you age your baby. No way.
Can I ask a hypothetical?
Why not? Because how is that different? How is that different to any other form of child abuse?
What if she had a twin and you married the twin?
There you go. It's the same damn thing, right?
Is the twin the same as your wife? Let's say your wife died and she had a twin and you married the twin. Are you marrying your wife again? No.
You'd be pretty damn lucky if your wife died and she did have an identical twin that was interested in you.
And they were personality, that'd be a really good win. But I do want to ask a couple specific questions so we can get this kind of like a very base train. I feel like I know what Jason's is, but I'm actually going to ask you, what is your specific thoughts on the ethics of reproductive cloning? I think I know what they are, but
yeah, I think it's very complicated. I think that I would agree with most scientists that right now that the ethics around this are so complicated that we have refrained from ethically cloning humans, although I believe that there are places like South Korea and other places that claim to have cloned embryos. So I think it does create a lot of ethical concerns. I'm probably on the side of not doing it in agreement with the scientific consensus, but I think that it's reasonable to have these discussions, and I could see sometime in the future when maybe we do consider human cloning.
Can I ask a quick question? So what if hypothetically you could make an exact grown replica of somebody you lost? Would it be immoral to do that?
Would it be moral to create them?
You mean like 3D printed person?
Like the exact damn thing, man. Like, yeah.
So basically, you're talking about like you're not just cloning them and like growing. It's just like it's cloning and then they're their person. But not because every time we're talking about
the same memory and everything,
cloning, they're never gonna have the same up here. It's never ever
dying.
That's why I said it's. That's why I said. That's why I'm saying it this way, in it being like in.
You're talking about an exact clone of somebody. Is that wrong?
It's great to be back.
I think it depends on who the person is, and I think it. Not only that, but I think it depends on. I think it depends on like general cloning or human cloning viability anyway. So
it shouldn't really matter, right? That's the person, right?
Well, yes and no. So if there's a person that died because they were in the middle of arson and just burned down 6 buildings, I'm not really in favor of cloning them back to life to let them continue arson if they come back exactly as they were. So I'm not really okay with that. But if we're talking about cloning somebody who was an arsonist and they died, and then you cloned them from a baby and they changed and their life was different and they lived completely different factors.
I got that.
I've got no problem with that happening because they don't necessarily have to turn out to be an arson. But if we're cloning them exactly as how they were, that guy's going to go up and burn 6 more buildings and die.
But you can argue like changing the guy, no?
I'm saying, well, the only reason I'm going to argue against that is just because you said he was going to be exactly the same. Like, it was going to be an exact replica down to, like, his neurons.
But I'm saying, like, we can have an argument of studying a guy and understanding why he became that way in the first place, right?
Yeah,
and it's a potential benefit.
Be exactly that way when he comes out of it. He is, at that moment...
Now we're getting into the prison conversation about punishing people.
Let me finish, Navik.
In executing people. Okay.
Let me finish, Navik. Thank you. So
could you clone him and then put him in jail for the rest of his life again if he died?
Well, see. Well, so let's say you clone this guy, and again, it's an exact copy, right? The only way to keep him from doing arson is to take that clone and immediately put him into some rehabilitation camp. So what you're doing is you're creating a being, and you're instantly putting them away in some sort of rehabilitation or prison. That's ridiculous.
And you study him to understand why he did it in the first place, to make sure others don't do it. Like you study a serial killer to understand why a serial killer killed in the first place.
Do that anyway without having to create the full clone. I don't think you need a full clone to be able to do that. That's not necessary.
Sometimes people just.
You say there are plenty of other crazy people out there, right?
You don't need a full clone of someone to do that, though. You don't need a full human clone of that to study their brain.
We're all stuck up in crazy people. We don't need to clone anymore, is what you're saying.
What?
We don't need to create crazy people to learn from them, to study and learn from them, to understand why they did the act in the first.
To learn from them, no. If somebody was, we're not creating this arsonist in the first place. He was already there. We didn't clone him from something and then he existed and then we cloned him again. He got born. Yeah. He was an arsonist. All right. Then he died. And in this case,
this is the conversation we have when it comes to.
If he was born, he grew up in life, he was an arsonist, and he died. I don't see if we could take his brain there and test it from where that was, that's fine. If we could clone his brain specifically and figure out why he was an arsonist from that somehow, fine. But I don't think it takes cloning the entire person as it was around them, making them be alive, and then putting them somewhere where we're studying them. I think that's unethical.
We're having a question about like punishment, like in executing a person versus leaving them alive. Some people argue it's better to have the person alive, the serial killer alive, so we can understand why they kill people in the first place in order to prevent them from killing people, or just kill the bastard and show him as a lesson to everybody else not to do this crime. And that can work too. We can just bring him back in his story.
I agree. We should kill the bastard.
Nivek, we're not cloning people
there you go.
Put them in prison. That's ridiculous.
I said we can clone them to study, or we could just clone them to kill them and show them as a lesson to others to not do this again.
That's also ridiculous. Why making life to destroy it on purpose is incredibly fucked up, dude.
This is what will happen.
No, creating life on purpose to specifically destroy it is incredibly fucked up. That is incredibly fucked up.
And you're talking about ethics?
It can deter people from committing a crime, though.
Just murder it. That's insane.
It could deter people from committing. Deter people from committing a crime, though.
The death penalty doesn't
this
even.
This could happen to you.
So why would creating a cloning
do in medieval times?
Killing an actual person. It doesn't make any sense, Nivek.
They hang you and they cut your gut open and they burn you at the stake. I don't know. I'm just throwing shit out there, man.
I know it doesn't make any sense, dude. Oh my goodness. Was it fucking? But yeah, no. Was it? Let's see. We only have a few more people in here. I've already gotten everybody's statements on there. Let's see what the YouTube chat's going on. Do. Well, science is remake ethical claims. It forms its ethical decisions. Yeah, I'd agree with that there, Jason. Paul's going at it a little bit.
Ball Diablo was saying, how can science make ought claims? Which is a good, that's a good point of discussion. I don't think science does make ought claims. Should we or shouldn't we do something? Science essentially provides information, outputs from results, and then there are ethical decisions made around those. So I don't think it's a science itself isn't doing that. It's scientists are evaluating the scientific evidence in relationship to the world around us, and they're making those ethical points of view. But it's a good thing to broach.
Yeah, Jack, that's nice to look at the comments in the Discord chat, because a lot of times we don't.
Yeah, was it so with reproductive cloning, which we've talked about for a good minute, it seems like we've got pretty much a pretty good split between like neutral, unethical, and ethical. So I think it's, and honestly, it seems to be like the time as it is right now that it's unethical for some people, only because of its viability and the technology that we have currently. So I could see this conversation happening in the future where more people are siding on ethical because of those two things. Yeah. Was it? I'm already on the side of that it is ethical regardless of those things, because I believe it can bring about a better future with all of the things that it brings. So I'm already pre on the side of ethical for it. But let's go ahead and switch the topic over to therapeutic cloning very specifically. Does anybody have any problems or any ethical problems with specifically therapeutic cloning?
What is this exactly?
Therapeutic cloning is the process of cloning just organs, and that organs include anything, including skin, liver, heart, of cloning those things to be put into people or to replace like lungs, burn damage from fires and stuff like that. Do you think that therapeutic cloning, taking cells like skin cells and cloning the skin cells to graft onto somebody's arm after they've been burned badly, is that ethical? I would say no. Yes.
Unethical?
Ethical, yeah, because in this case you would basically
unethical or ethical?
Imagine you needed a lung transplant, right?
I didn't hear your answer. Is it unethical or ethical?
I say it's ethical.
I would say the same. I don't see really any real reason to say unethical.
Yeah, I would say it's ethical on that therapeutic cloning, and I couldn't.
In fact, it would solve a big problem as well of like people getting kidnapped and harvesting their own organs. So that would be actually maybe decline the child trafficking and other human trafficking too, possibly.
And I think that would be a lot easier in that case if we were going to have people mass producing things. I think it would be easier to mass produce like cloning specific organs than it would be cloning an entire person. So I think that would lead to the decrease in the human trafficking we're talking about. So I don't think people would clone full people for human trafficking, or in that case when it comes to organ stealing specifically, because they wouldn't need to clone full people. They could spend a fraction of the time and cost cloning an organ.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I would agree on that point there. Let's see, Mace, therapeutic cloning. What do you think?
Nothing wrong with it.
Nothing wrong with it. Not unethical in any way. Just
it's definitely harder to do than reproductive cloning.
Sure.
Don't see any ethical issues with it though.
Okay. Interesting. Trav, if you're there, do you have any thoughts about the ethics of therapeutic cloning? No, not there. Perfect. Is it? Just play. Is it? So actually, is it? In that case, I don't really have a whole shit ton more to talk about in the ethics of it, unless you guys just want to discuss some cool facts about it. Is it about the different types of natural cloning there are, and
so what are conclusions that?
Actually, I've got a couple of fun questions we can go over here. If anybody's a theologist in here, I don't know if anybody is. I'm not 100% positive, but is it if we can clone people fully? Is it does that make us like? Is that a slap in the face of God? Like, is that a slap in the face of like the ideas that you have about being created in a special way and like being the one thing that God like chose to create? I'm interested in any theologians' perspective on that.
I think I would have a hard time when it comes to the religious zealots because they would maybe object to the unnatural way of making humans.
Yeah,
I think you might find more leeways from Christian apologists or religious apologists who basically try to adopt new technologies, new things to their own religious beliefs in the sense that, at the end of the day, it's a human semen entering a female egg, and that's how we got the thing. So whatever, it's the same shit, but in a different medium, I would say. So
okay,
it depends what you talk to.
One quick thing. So we concluded that cloning, like cloning another person,
as it stands right now, reproductive cloning at this second in time when we're talking about it is unethical just due to viability reasons and the fact that we haven't gotten into it enough, basically, as a species and as a there's right now it's pretty much in the United States at the very least it's free reign on full reproductive and therapeutic inquiry. Basically, there isn't.
But not as in making another person, because like what Jason Thorne said,
studied here.
It's not the same person. Like what Jason Thorne said, it's not the same person.
Yeah, it's not the same person.
Okay.
After experience, just like I said, the fact that you can absorb some DNA from being inside of whatever ovum that you're in when you're being, multiplied from the cloning process, and the fact that you could take some genetic information from there, and then that your life is going to be different, like by what the mother eats and all that crap, and what cravings she has, and what happens when you leave, and how you're raised, and all that other shit. That's going to change you completely different from the person that whoever you were cloned from.
Unless what if you can pass down the knowledge?
Clean roomed something and made a complete recreation of their life somehow.
What if you can pass down the knowledge?
And even then, they probably wouldn't be the same.
What if you can pass down the knowledge?
If you could pass down specific knowledge, like if we could program knowledge,
it's not the physical part. It's the mind of what you have in the mind and.
It's like in the movie Carbon, where basically a human body is basically a replaceable vessel for the human conscious, where basically you can clone as many human body as you can, but then you can still use them as your own consciousness, like a software in a hard drive.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like you have the information of the mind, and you just download it.
Technically, that could be a thing. But I think that in technology, getting that far to where that would be a thing, I don't think that these things would be. This is going to be weird to say. In the context of what we're talking, I don't think these things would be turned on until the consciousness would be entered into it. So it wouldn't be like it's something that's living and experiencing things all the time. It would literally be a shell for a consciousness to enter. I don't know where I stand on that 100% just yet on this, because it's a part of the ethics question on it that I'm like, if it's a shell that doesn't feel anything and it's not aware of anything, and it's like there's no processes going on in it that are like making it aware of something, that I don't think it would be too bad to put your consciousness inside of it, like, as something like that. If we could find out where the consciousness is in the brain and then cut that out for something, and then be able to put our consciousness into it, that would be okay, I think.
Jack, a quick question.
I don't think if something's aware that
this is
I want
right.
to talk about like when you're an individual. Like if you have a person, I want to talk about the person being an individual. If you have a person and they're only exposed to you, and you give them everything you know, is that in a sense having them partially become you? Because what's in their mind, what was in your mind is now in their mind, right? So in a way.
Well, it would be your mind in that case. At the point in time where your consciousness is going into their brain, that is still your mind. Just because you inhabit a different, at the point where we can distinguish consciousness from the meat, at that point, then yeah, it does. It's not, the consciousness would be your mind, and you going into it would be being that. You're not. And in the case of that, I would only think it's unethical if you're like taking over something else's mind versus just entering something. Because if this is a full thing that has its own like wills and thoughts and ideas, and then all of a sudden your consciousness just enters and boots this thing out, that's fucked up. But if it's just a shell and you just enter it and you're capable of like, living again, I don't see a problem with that ethically.
Yeah,
because that's what a kid is, right? A kid is
what happens
the parent downloading their knowledge into the kid.
Hold on a second. What happens if you don't want the clone anymore? Do you have to pay clone support? I would say if you created something completely and then you just decided to give it up and then somebody else had to take care of it, you'd probably have to pay some version of clone support.
No, I agree with you. 100% agree.
It's kind of like the kid with the parent. The kid that did a bad act. A lot of times they say, "Well, you can't blame the kid. That kid was taught that by the parent. It's the parent that should be prosecuted and tried instead of the kid, because there was nothing. It has nothing to do with them. But so a lot of what a person knows, they got it from another. Their knowledge is downloaded information that's passed on from another person.
Actually, I don't.
So in a way, they're partially other people. In a way, they're kind of another person.
But this is an interesting idea. An idea that actually happened to some extent, but we might be also the cause for another thing. Let's say that we have made a technological achievement where we can clone a fully fledged human being from the bottom up, the same way that you described it. Whatever the technology is, what if this thing's got exported, this technology, or leaked out, or got espionage and got stolen by another entity or nation? Those nations and entity exported those technologies to, let's say, increase the amount of numbers of certain ethnic minority, that those ethnic minorities are the super dominant political power, let's say, like let's hypothesize like the original Chinese, the Han Chinese, let's say this is an example, or let's say the Nazis early on with the Aryan race, or the Moscow Russians, where it's also like an ethnic group. It's not the only one. I don't know if it's the majority or not, but regardless, would you say then that we are the inventor of this thing? We also have the responsibility to maintain this technology to us, to make it inaccessible, unusable for nefarious means. And if we are unable to maintain or be certain that this thing will not go out and be used in a nefarious way, would you say then the responsibility be fall on us?
Well, of course, the responsibility would fall in whatever part. Like if you created the technology and you let it fall out of your hands, or somebody came and stole it from you, yeah, it would be a responsibility to create it and not to secure it. Because
and how's the chances of this as well?
I don't think
how are the chances?
I don't think the chances would be too great because I think the second that something like human cloning becomes viable, that's something the government's going to be like, hey, we're going to put lock and key around that. You're going to work in our facilities, and when if that happens, it'd be really difficult for armed people to, or even espionage for people to go in and just steal this. Not that it's impossible; it's been done before. But it would definitely be a lot more difficult than it would be on, just to get into.
But then you understand it creates another problem, the transparency issue with the people and the government. Then how can we know for sure that the government is acting as it's supposed to be and not abusing these technologies for other means?
Well, it's the same level. Well, you have to give it the same level of trust you've always given it. Otherwise, you have to be conspiratorially thinking about the government constantly. Like, you have to give it the same level of trust you have that it's going to do anything with your taxpayer dollars. Because otherwise you don't have trust in your government in the first place, and you've got this, you can't do it. You wouldn't want to trust them in the first place with this technology if you can't trust them in the first place. And it's not like, they haven't done unethical things before in the past, but you can't be skeptical about the entirety of the government the entire time, always. Otherwise, you're just going to lose your fucking mind.
I mean, yes, I agree with you, but still, historically, those things happen very frequently, where things that the government propagandize the people, brainwash the people, propaganda and misinformation by the government to the people, moved the people to either agree on a certain war or a civil war or genocides by many other parties as well. So the possibility is not far-fetched. It's not even conspiratorial because we're not discussing flat Earth or the anti-vaccine stuff. So it is very likely. I mean, this could very possibly be.
People have problems with it, sure, but is it likely that someone's going to be able to get into whatever facility this is, steal whatever is necessary, bring it all the way? Is it likely? Sure, and the fact that things are likely and that they can happen.
So what's this technology?
Technology all the time. It would be cloning in this case. Was that people steal technology all the time from other people, so it's just as likely as anything to worry about. So let's say we invented the best jets ever, and they're so fucking advanced that they'll just wipe out the competition without a problem, and we've never have to worry about anything again. It's just as worrisome to have that built and created and implemented to be used and stolen. It's just as worrisome as that would be for cloning. It's just as worrisome as it was for when we started doing nuclear bombs, and we're like, oh,
chemical weapons.
Chemical weapons.
Exactly.
The risk doesn't change there. We will always be taking a risk when furthering technology in every single way. We will always be taking a risk.
And we always make the same mistake again.
No,
never learn from.
I don't think we always make the same mistake. I think we have made the same mistake quite a few times, but I don't think we always make the same mistake.
Yeah, and we kind of have been lucky that those mistakes wasn't really somewhere around us that we have felt it dramatically. But some people did feel those mistakes to a large extent. And it's not guaranteed that the more scientific achievements and advancement we make, that those mistakes will not hit us so deep and hard that one time we really may need to put a hard brake on certain scientific achievements, because the power that those things gives us far outweigh the wisdom, the cultural attitude, the political attitude, or the maturity of a civilization to actually use those things ethically, morally speaking as well, and wisely as well. We don't have those things yet to use them correctly. So how can we actually make them happen and use them willy-nilly? Because nobody can guarantee, nobody can be sure of anything.
Around the world, there are huge ethical and human rights violations. Like human rights violations on people of different races, creeds, sexual orientation, gender identity. The list goes on. That this happens all over the world, and we try and there are a variety of different ways that we try to mitigate those things. Like, look what's going on in Ukraine right now. Like, we're not invading, or we're not sending troops into Russia, but we don't agree with what Russia's doing. So we're trying to, as a world, take action to try to deter that. So, so I think that this falls in that realm that the concern amongst the scientific community and probably most people in general are the human rights and ethical considerations around cloning. So, like, taking somebody's DNA and cloning them without their knowledge, doing something like it's not. I don't think it's an issue of what happens after the clone is created. Like, after the clone is created, the clone is a sentient human being. It has human rights. we address those issues. It's the issue of like why people would try to do cloning, what would be the purpose of that, and how they may, whether there may be ethical violations. But the thing is that this happens all over the world. People make their human rights violations everywhere. All like millions of people are in situations where their rights are being taken away from them, and even to the point of like during the World War II, didn't the Germans were like, we need to crank up the number of babies. So we're going to like essentially make people have babies. Like I think there was some like forced efforts to like make German women have babies with soldiers so they could start to increase their military population. So I think these are good points to bring up, and certainly cloning, it's perceived as being something that could make it easy for people to crank out large numbers of people unethically. So I think that's there are reasonable questions around that. So I think you guys are bringing up good points. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with anybody on that. I just think that it's around that human rights ethical violation of how cloning comes into play, not post clone, not post the situation after they've been cloned, because we know what the rights are around sentient beings. And I'll just stop right there. See if anybody has any thoughts.
I want to go ahead real quick since we've got some people, extra people in here. Concept Hut and Fate have joined. Was it a Concept Hut? Was it real quick? Was it can you give me how you feel about the ethics of reproductive cloning and then of therapeutic cloning? If you how you feel on the ethical side of those things?
Just here to listen.
Oh, just here to listen. Excellent. Fate, what do you think? The ethics of reproductive cloning and the ethics of therapeutic cloning.
I think that you could grow some organs in a lab and replace them. I think that would be an advancement in medical science, which would have countless benefits for people. But though I do object a little bit to an over efficient medical system, because there's purpose to having natural failures of life. This is how life improves through generations and the weeding out of the weaker in the populace. And so I think that maybe I'm sure that these will be prohibitively expensive, at least initially, and so I think I think that maybe hopefully at least all I can hope for is that we start selecting for intelligence a little bit more as a society. But that is what I think about cloning is used for medical treatment, for like the creation of new organisms. Ethically, I don't think that there's anything we really can do that would. I mean, well, it's getting into strange territory, of course, when you're creating life. Though we don't really understand the intricacies of everything entirely. We could create some invasive species. We could create some pathogen that would lay dormant for months until it infected everybody and then killed everybody simultaneously. There are a lot of things we could do with this gene editing technology, but some nefarious things, diabolical things, even
like CRISPR.
Yes, like CRISPR.
Yeah.
But
there's been very many beneficial things that have been done with the same type of idea too. But you're right, there is very much a big potential for terrible things to be done.
I was actually just reading where, like in Florida, they have a big concern around mosquitoes, and so they've genetically modified males who carry a gene that kill the female. So the male breeds with the female, and then the female dies. So which could have far-reaching implications on ecosystems. I'm not saying that. I mean, I think that the entomologists have explored this and they've thought about why they're doing it, which I think have valid reasons. But it's a good point that like there can be unknown consequences to these events that we may not fully understand until they actually happen.
True. Was it are you finished up there, Fate, or did you have some more?
Well, I think that if the elite get their hands on this technology, there's nothing that will stop them. No laws barred. They'll do whatever they want anyway.
I think that applies to every type of technology that exists. I don't think that's just limited to cloning. I think that everything that ever comes up, they're just going to be able to have no problem and be able to use it at their whim.
Yeah. So, our qualms and petty considerations. I was looking for a different word, but our petty considerations really will have no effect ultimately on the course of this technology, I think.
Fair enough. Is it Bruce?
What's up?
Bruce, I would love to get your ideas on the ethics of reproductive and therapeutic cloning.
Ethics of that?
Yeah, whether it's unethical or ethical to reproductively clone, and whether it's ethical or unethical to therapeutically clone, or not.
I don't find it to be an ethical issue. I don't find it to be an ethical issue until it's wielded poorly.
Okay.
I
agree with that.
Because I think that's the case for lots of medicine. Yeah, so, if people were to go down that rabbit trail of cloning, you're going to be, ultimately it'll be less than anything that exists now. Ultimately, it won't be, it won't be an image bearer in my worldview of God. It will be a man-made creation. And so it'll have its problems. And if wielded properly, it'd be all right.
Was it if you, in this case, if you were to meet a clone, right? Like if you just met him on the street, and for some reason, let's say you knew he was a clone somehow, he told you, or somebody else told you. Was it would you treat that person the same as you would a regular person, or would that affect your dealing with them in any way whatsoever?
Possibly.
Okay. What do you think might be the thing?
I mean, it would be, to me, it might be like no different than any other man-made creation.
Okay, so you might see him as an artifact versus a person. So the only question I have is, in that instance, if nobody told you and you weren't able to distinguish the difference, right? Like nobody told you, and you were talking to him, you'd believe he was a person.
I mean, we can kind of do that right now, sort of like on the internet. Right? I don't necessarily know if there's a person. It could be a fairly decent speaking engine. So if I don't have any way of knowing, then I'll have to treat them as the same I would another human being.
Right, but like I don't think that they're actually, like, in that case there wouldn't actually be a difference. Like in the robot to a person, you can effectively make like really good engines that'll emulate what a person might say. But in this case, it would be so human. It would be, because it's human. It would be human. It would be a person. You wouldn't be like, there's no way to distinguish it unless somebody told you or found out. So I don't see how knowing that versus not knowing that would change how you'd interact with it.
Like I said, if I don't know the difference, then I would act accordingly.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Just like now.
So okay, so if you had
know if people are real on the internet,
What if you had a friend for like 5 years and then he comes out and he's like, yeah, I'm a clone.
I'd be like, it's been a good time hanging out with you as a pet. And I'm sorry you're not an image bearer, and your existence will just cease when you die. I'm not even sorry. At that point, it would just be like, I've had a really good, experience with a dog.
So wait. So hold on. That's an interesting way to look at things. So
what if it says just kidding?
Jason looks like he's got something to say. Hold on. No, Jason looks like he's got something to say.
Is that a troll? Is that a troll question? Are you serious?
No, that's like a serious thing. Like if it's not a human being, it's a fabricated piece of man. It's no different than a cloned or genetically engineered puppy at that point.
So a clone is not. You don't see a clone as a sentient human being.
No.
But in physical reality, it is completely indistinguishable from a human being.
That's fine. It is indistinguishable.
It's still a human being. Like, it's literally the same thing as what its predecessor was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would disagree.
It's actually, even that is debatable. So what do you mean by the same?
Where's the disagreement? I'm totally cool with it. Where does the disconnect happen?
The origin.
Right.
No. I want to hear it from Bruce. Well, where does the disconnect happen?
Yeah, it's created by man.
So is man.
The second that
no, it's not.
Hold on, so hold on a second before you get in there, Fateh, I just want to talk to Bruce about this. Then we could go into that for maybe a second or two. So for you, the second that it becomes a man-made thing, it's completely separated from being like us. It can't be like us anymore. Okay,
I'm just interested. Try, but it's not actually.
There's no soul.
Yeah.
So I don't. I mean, for me, I don't believe in the concept of soul, so that's not really a thing. But was it?
But I do.
But Bruce, you for sure do. So I can see where you're coming from on that. Does it Fateh, you had something to say, and then I want to get Jason again real quick.
Man begets man. If a man created a clone of a man, he would just be creating a man through a different mechanism.
That's your presupposition. It's not mine.
This is not a presupposition.
It is. I don't believe that man creates man. I believe that man is the means by which man comes to be, but what makes it distinguishable as a human being with a soul or a mind is outside of man. It's in the metaphysical.
But if God create man and man create a man, it's still God's creation, no?
It is God's creation.
So
if it is a
shouldn't be
man,
a problem, then.
No, it's not the same.
Okay.
Now,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Maybe if we're talking about creating people in a petri dish, and the same means by which a baby is born, then possibly we're talking about a new human being. But if it's not happening that way, then I would say no. Right? Because that'd be no different than artificial insemination.
So somebody who's been artificially inseminated is not a human?
No, I'm saying in that case they are.
Okay. So that's
if that's the means. So if that's the means by which we're going, okay, if that's the means by which we get to a clone, then it's not a clone; it's a new baby.
But hold on a second. But the difference is that the clone, all the way up until it has the exact same genetic instructions, all the way up until it starts absorbing a slight amount from whoever the donor ovum is, and then when they're born, the only thing different from their genetic differences is the experiences they have.
Yeah, so then I would say if they're
born,
not
necessarily a new baby. It is 100% a clone, but it is a new person.
So in that case, it's the same as the artificial insemination, and it now is an image bearer and has a mind that is experiencing life sentient just the way we are. It is a human being in that case, yes.
Okay, so your differences is from like the test tube to that happening. Okay,
yeah, right.
Interesting. So you would say that, like, let's say we took two of the same cells, we cloned somebody in a test tube, and we had like the type of cloning with the in vitro fertilization. You would have both of them grow up; they look exactly the same. There'd be no distinguishable differences. They have their own versions of hobbies. One of them is a person, and one of them isn't.
Yeah.
Have you ever read Brave New World?
That doesn't click with me how that works for you, but I get that you got your
Huxley.
Right. Was it?
Brave New Worlds.
I mean, this is an example. I mean, this is a thing that I actually mentioned, is that it depends what do we mean by a human being and how do we define those things. And this is where you will have differences of people's reaction on what is a human being. And this is just another example, which is not a really surprising thing, because we've seen how cultures treat other cultures based on differences. differences of origin, differences of ethnicity, color, race, and they do many, many terrible things. And this is a consequence which I wish not the cloned being to experience. And this is what I would have them forsaken the experience, the horrific experience that they may experience.
That's why I want to ask Bruce, but I'm afraid to ask.
Hold on, real quick. Was it Jason, then Nivek? Go ahead.
I was going to say, it hasn't been that long ago since we didn't consider people, African Americans, as human beings. They were 3/5 of a human being. They were considered animals. So I would agree that it hasn't been that long ago that there have been different delineations.
I mean, you could say we, but I mean, don't speak for me, right?
That's a known fact of history that from historical terms that people in America did not consider people who are black as human. Correct.
There were many majorities, but not exclusively. There were many.
That's why I want to ask you, Bruce. That's why I want to ask you, Bruce. How would you feel if you found out you were a clone?
Come on, man. Nobody thinks the entirety of people thought that. Of course, it's the majority, and the reason why history was written that way. Come on.
Well, no, I'm trying to make an example that as otherwise. Like there's historical evidence of people that were against such thoughts, and even in the early 1600s.
Sure,
that's a quick question.
No, I agree.
That's why I want to ask Bruce. How would he feel if he found out he was a clone? Bruce, would you look at yourself the same way, or would you just accept not having a soul?
What do you if I found out that I was a clone?
Yeah, sure.
Was I created?
Would you be okay with that? Would you look at yourself the same way? How would you feel?
Well, it depends. No, for Bruce, it would depend
if he
on
how it was created.
A clone that got put into a woman, or if he was born in a test tube.
What if you were a clone fertilized embryo?
Bruce is dividing along an in-group and saying, well, I wouldn't see that person as the same way in having a soul. And I was like, well, what if that divide line it included you in you being a person that was cloned? Would you look at yourself the same way in being included as a person with a soul or not?
I have no frame of reference to answer the question. I mean, that's like saying, what if I had purple skin? Like, or even worse, like that's like saying, what if I cease to have a mind? And in that case, like, I don't know what you mean. It's hard. I can't answer the question.
I mean, like,
I don't have the understanding.
You're dividing along an in-group and saying that a person that is cloned is not included in having a soul. You could have said, well, I include that person with having a soul, but you drew it along an in-group inclusion of a person that is cloned does not have a soul. And I was saying, well, what if you fell on that side of the in-group in you being a person that was also cloned? Would you?
I guess you wouldn't consider yourself a person if that was the case.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, at that point.
Hey, what is a person? Yeah. What is a person?
Right, exactly.
Nobody knows. Do you know how much this topic is discussed in history?
I'd say anything that has in it as the explanation of it, and that has something that's gained sapience. So anything within the Homo genus that's gained sapience, I would consider.
No, that has nothing to do with personhood, actually.
Well, okay, we can scrap the Homo part and just say sapience. I would say once you gain sapience and after you've gained sentience and then gain sapience, you become a person. So I'm okay.
Person? No. Personhood is like a legal term.
Go ahead.
Person is like a legal term. I think you're confusing these terms. Like person, like everyone does.
Using it as the legal term and then telling me I'm confusing it with whatever term I'm using.
No, we're talking about civil rights and shit. If we're talking about people having civil rights, people were not women were not persons. They did not have persons.
That's what we were talking
That's like
about.
a legal. Yeah. So like if you had a clone, like you'd have to register it to the government and make a person for it, a fucking birth certificate. It would have to have a birth certificate to have civil rights.
Why wouldn't it have a birth certificate?
Personhood. I'm talking about personhood. Like that's why I'm bringing this up. It's a whole fucking thing.
Tell me why it wouldn't have a birth certificate. Why not?
Because it wasn't born.
Okay, so you think that just because we can't make something equivalent, we can't that'll be impossible. Like we won't be able to do that.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just bringing up this whole thing, like with the whole.
It's not. Then we're obviously there's going to be something created that's the equivalent of a birth for a clone person. I don't see where that argument's going to go.
If they had a natural birth.
Well,
then they would have a birth
Like,
certificate.
oh my god! So the only difference would be you get a
Like,
birth
was it obvious for women? Was it obvious for blacks? No.
You get a clone to
like
start
we had to fucking fight for that and shit.
Hold on a second.
Like civil rights movement.
Well,
Like there has to.
I'm gonna talk. You can't just talk over me.
You've been doing the same to me.
I'm trying to get this out, but every time it seems like I take a pause, somebody wants to jump in on my pause, like I'm finished. And that's totally fair because I do pause quite a bit in my conversation. So I'm not gonna fault anybody for doing that. I do take long pauses when I'm talking.
Not really.
Was that
accepted?
Yeah, exactly. I want to know basically where is it where that becomes a problem when they don't have a birth certificate. So a person that's born has a birth certificate, and now all of a sudden there's a problem because the clone doesn't have something similar. We would obviously make something clone. Where's they would have?
Yeah, you'd have to make. That's what I'm saying. You'd have to make. I'm bringing up that topic that you would have to make a birth certificate for the clone for it to have civil rights. That's all I'm saying.
Oh well, then if that's what you're saying, then
yeah. So you probably agree. Like I'm just bringing up that.
That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. If that's what it needs for that.
But I'm just saying, like, there's like a confusion with terms. I'm just saying, like, there's a little confusion with terms, like saying, if you're a person gets cloned, person gets cloned. No, you're cloning like, use the proper terms. You're cloning a being, like, or a physical, like, biological being.
Okay,
that is a Homo sapien. Just use like at least the scientific terms. It's like person is very confusing.
I keep getting that bit.
No worries.
Sorry, go ahead and say that again.
So you're saying religion?
I'm talking about somebody that has sapience. That's what I'm using this. Now, if we're talking about it with the legal definitions, I'm not going to disagree with you there because you're right on what that means.
It seems like, just to say real quickly, that throughout history, this aspect of personhood, which I agree, has some legal connotations, but essentially means that you can reason, you have
it's like religious connotation. It's very sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, totally. But I feel like that this issue of whether somebody is a person or not has throughout history been used as a manner to degrade groups of people to be like, you're not actually human, and therefore we can commit atrocities against you.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah.
And so I kind of feel like that. Yeah. Okay. I think we're in agreement.
Okay. So I think from what I'm saying is that. Okay, so I actually, I kind of think I see where you're coming from a little bit more, Ball, now that I'm thinking about it for a second. So I don't think that humans as they are, like, no, this is going to sound really fucked up. I don't think humans as they are technically have rights just by existing. We have rights by governments that give us the ability to defend ourselves and exist that way. That's the reason why we have rights. Is it because somebody can tell somebody no about doing something about violating our rights? Is it So in that case, is it?
But what if the government goes against your civil rights?
Well, then
you have to fight against them.
They're not protected rights anymore.
So we could be unjust against
inalienable rights, and the government decides to try to alienate you from those rights. It won't happen. It can't happen. That's what the government.
That's called right abuse.
Yeah. So unfortunately, that doesn't.
So we can be unjust.
Yeah, so the government didn't make your rights if they can abuse.
So they can start them, but like once they use a term like inalienable, they can't take them away. They're not capable of. They granted the right, and now they're not capable of taking that right away. And if they do take that right away, we have the right to disregard all of their rules if they start stealing our rights from us. So,
I'd like to backtrack a second and say, well, first of all, I think that Homo sapiens were not the only people with personhood, though it's true that our rights, legally, if you're going to call personhood being a legal definition that only arise that if you want to say that there were no such thing as persons before we had government, then it's kind of a silly thing to say. But if you want to make that, that stubborn assertion, Ball, Bayal, then that's fine with me. But I think that if we were to escape from this arbitrary legal definition of personhood and use it more colloquially, more naturally, as we would describe person.
Well, like corporations are persons.
You or I. If we're going to escape from the legal definitions, then I think historically, the Homo sapiens were not the only persons. I think that the Neanderthals were definitely persons. And
anything that gains sapience, yeah, I would agree that.
But the potential thing is that because a person's a clone, you could potentially not identify them as a person, right?
This isn't making sense to me. Like when you're using the word person to describe like a man, like it's just bringing in too much shit.
Broaden your horizons, my fellow.
You're getting hung up on the legal part of the way.
Consider more than one definition of a word. You know, they list multiple in the dictionary.
But when personhood is involved, and then you're talking about like biological things and personhood, like you have to differentiate between the two.
Why?
Because you're not a person unless you're it's a big topic. Like personhood is like, I can't even get into it. Like it's such a big topic.
You can't get into it. It's such a big topic. Okay. Is it
yeah. Trust me.
I agree. I agree with you. You can't
basically. Personhood is like the right to own yourself, kind of thing, right? And where before people didn't see others as human beings, they're just objects to be owned. They don't have personhood. Yeah. They're just
exactly.
They're like crop. They're like corn or
animals, like basically like cattle.
They don't have personhood.
We've always
So they're property. They're property. They don't have personhood.
Okay, so that's where the whole like clone thing comes in. Like, are they property or are they
No, they're property. They're just crop. We farm them and we eat them.
Looked at people that treated people as property as assholes. As soon as we look through a historical lens, the second we look back in time and we look at people who treated people as property, everybody goes, "Those people were pieces of shit." Every single time that people treated people like property, you look at it historically.
But we treat animals like property.
Yeah, because
like clones. Like, what if someone was like? What if someone like? I think Bruce was saying like, what if?
And treat them like we own them.
Maybe we can eat the clones. Maybe they're good protein. We can farm them.
Also,
exactly. Clone farming.
They may have a light form of sentience, but they don't have sapience, and therefore
very nutritious.
We treat them like we own them because we do. If you look at it from every legal aspect, we do own animals.
Well, that was the thing with people in the past. They were looked at as animals to be owned as property, and the absurdity of looking at them as humans was crazy.
I think that the person that said like this aspect of thinking of personhood colloquially is a good way of thinking about it, because certainly personhood has a legal connotation, but I think in general we think of personhood as related to like the ability to make decisions for your own self.
Personhood is self-ownership. Personhood is self-ownership of yourself. You have the right to say what you want or want not to do, and not be property of another human being. And that other human being owns you as if you don't fucking matter. Your view don't matter. Your children's children don't matter. You're just farm animals or pets.
You're right. So historically, have we not decided that that's fucking terrible? Have we not all decided, like at this point, we've looked back and historically been like, oh, that's
but not with animals yet.
In that case, if we have the historical case that owning people, doesn't matter what kind of people or how people are or whatever, owning them is wrong, we think it's bad, moving forward, we're probably not going to treat people, even if they're clones, like we own them, because we've already gone through a historical lens of like thousands of years of seeing that this is a terrible fucking idea.
Okay, say your dog's name.
Victor.
Victor didn't respond.
He didn't even respond. He doesn't give a fuck. There he is. Yeah.
You're not going to say
he's sentient, like for sure.
Are you?
Like he has rights.
Right. He's got certain levels of rights. Yeah.
But so do I. I'm hungry.
Yeah, he's got certain levels of rights. But you know what he doesn't have a right to? If I decided to shave him completely, he has no right to tell me I can't do it. I can shave him and whatever I want.
What if you want to eat him?
I could draw a giant dick on his back in the form of hair.
You could eat him in like other countries.
He can't do anything about it.
Can you cook him and eat him?
Can I cook him and eat him if I was hungry and I didn't have anything else to eat and I was about to die? Yes, I can.
Okay.
The rights afforded to animals, based on what people would call animal rights, it's projection of the rights that we know of ourselves. The only reason animals possess what people call rights is because of how it makes us feel personally in our own rights that we think we have inalienably, at least in the United States and most other places.
No, we evolved to eat animals. We evolved.
I think they should extend
Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Wait a minute. Am I on the Ask Yourself Discord server? I can't remember.
Yeah, this is getting very
this is
that's
like
how what's his name is. Yeah,
Isaac
with the
from
animal.
Ask Yourself. Yeah, this is like
I can't deal with that guy.
Name a trait discussion.
Yeah.
Well,
To be fair, we can't put up our hands. We can all have webcams.
Right on. No web.
Let's let Zach go. Let's let Zach go.
No, Zach, we're good.
I was saying, there are like philosophies regarding why we should give animals a moral consideration based on multiple things, like their existence and that they are conscious to a certain extent, to a certain level and stuff. And they do make some valid arguments. I don't think the entire reason why they give animals rights is based on emotional projection. I think it's a very uncharitable view or a critique or even like a description of their own views. I think there are many animal rights advocates. I can give you names of some, like Philosophy Tube, for example. He will intrigue you with some interesting philosophical arguments.
They can have philosophical arguments, but they're dripping with the presuppositions of their personhood that they exist already. They have all of the presuppositions that are afforded to them based on their personhood, their mind, all of their ethics and morals are what shape their philosophy of animals.
But some people's presuppositions is far better and far more rational than other people's presuppositions.
By what standard? How do you base on that?
By observation.
You're basing it upon your own but you're basing it on your own presuppositions.
Like we can't experience gods, but we can experience animals. We can experience how animals behave. We can
is it
behave and how they interact. It's even far more rational than actually like adhering to some god's commands that you can't even see or talk. So the presuppositions have different values still.
You're still you're right. All of those values you have applied. They don't exist out of thin air. You've applied the value.
What, like life is good?
You've decided the value. All of it. Yes. That doesn't
life and death
all of that
like presuppositions.
All of that is applied when you make the philosophical argument any philosophical argument, especially one related to the rights of human beings, animals, and sentience.
Everything lives and dies. Like, what animal doesn't die? Like, we're all so similar. Why wouldn't we relate to animals? We are basically animals.
It's interesting.
You are relating to animals based on you are correct because of your own presuppositions.
But it's interesting that we're talking about animals, but we came to this point
in the chat asking about questions. We're trying to figure out who exactly was talking.
Yeah, so it's animals because they're not human beings. That's what we're talking about.
Right, but
he's got a couple of questions.
Initially, we were talking about clones, and then we jumped to animals. So I understand kind of the issues of moral considerations for animals, and that there may be some gray areas. But if we're talking about somebody like a clone, which is essentially a human being. I know you disagree with it; it's a human being, but I would think that we would have moral consideration for clones a lot more so than animals.
Well, what about animal clones? Not animal clones. Not if they were animal clones, we wouldn't give a fuck.
Well, we're talking about clones that are human.
I've got a couple of questions.
No, yeah, true, but like we have to say, you can clone animals. They are.
But the distinguishment between the animal clone. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You got a couple of questions here from the. Chat.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So Hillbilly asks you. So mentally retarded individuals are not human, and children are not human. I asked where he was getting the questions from, and he said according to the definitions given for a human being that you gave. So according to Hillbilly, the definitions that you gave for a human being, retarded individuals can't be human and children can't be.
Well, first, I wouldn't call them retarded individuals. I would call them individuals with an intellectual disability. And I would consider them human beings. And so maybe my definition wasn't clear enough. I mean, can people who have intellectual disabilities make decisions on their own? I guess there's some questions around that. I still would consider them human beings. Children, I think children are still developing. They're young adults. They're young humans. So that's a little different of a situation because they're in the stage of becoming a full-fledged human being. So maybe my statement wasn't actually clear, but I would consider those people as human beings. So
okay, yeah, he just asked to make sure because apparently he was having a
no, I think that's. I
there.
appreciate that clarification. Yeah.
Perfect. Was it? And so let's see. There's nobody else new in the room. It's
Yeah, I mean the problem is like ascribing value to something based on ability is not. That's not enough. I mean, you can make the argument, I guess, but you're going to be in a bad position if you make the argument that those with bad inabilities are not, not persons who don't have rights afforded to them.
I mean, like from a legal perspective, I'm imagining somebody could argue that somebody that doesn't have the capacity to make decisions for themselves, let's say you're in a coma and you can't make any decisions whatsoever. You're not, you're brain dead, but you're being kept alive by, machines, and somebody else is your guardian. Is that person, are they considered a person legally? I don't know. I'm
they're your master, basically, right? Guardian
they're
is
considered a
master.
person. That's why we give them.
No, there's no personhood there.
You have control of their rights, right? So in this case, what it sounds
attorney,
In this case, what it is that this person goes into a coma, and because they're no longer capable of doing that, the nearest person to them generally gets what's considered what Paul just said, power of attorney, which basically just means you have control over their rights and decisions as far as legal decisions go, because
they can't make those decisions.
Yeah, so because they can't, you now have control of all legal decisions that they make now from then on. That means their assets, that means everything, their houses, everything that's got binding documents to it. You now control that.
Yeah. And it's an interesting topic. I mean, it's not uncontroversial. This topic of personhood is a controversial topic. But I think you guys are bringing up good points about the legal aspect and then the broader understanding colloquially of personhood. And those two things one is, I think, a subset of the other.
Well,
when you bring up cloning, everyone automatically assumes like you own the clone. So we're talking about rights automatically.
It's interesting that people think that, because when I started thinking about this, I did not assume that like whatsoever.
Yeah.
I was always assuming that this person, the second they're out there, their own individual.
I think it depends upon the intention when clones created. Like we need to know the intentions behind the creation.
That's for sure.
No, it depends on if it's a human or not. If you're cloning a human.
Yeah, of course, but let's assume
what it is. It's not
let's assume it's not.
Well,
let's assume it's not.
Animals, right? Because it's questioning if animals have personhood or not, and humans get one thought of as animals.
My intention is to clone the person for organs. Like it's not. My intention is not for them to
then
actually.
It's not a person, right?
It still is a person. Like the fact that we, in my view,
I would say it's ethically a problem then to just kill someone for their organs. If
correct.
It is a person.
Yeah,
it is ethically wrong to kill them for their organs. Correct. Yeah.
But they're not a person, right?
No. The thing is hold on a second. Why are we murdering someone for organs when we can print them?
Well, but
that's a different scenario.
Yeah, like in this scenario, let's say that a family has a sick kid and the kid needs a kidney, and they clone the kid so the new kid could have a kidney to take the kidney out. Do they have a right to just take that kidney out of the kid? I mean, that's kind of complicated because it's a kid. But
No. Based on therapeutic cloning versus reproductive cloning, that would be considered incredibly unethical, and they wouldn't even do that. They would just therapeutically clone a liver. Yeah. They would.
What about
get close to making a full person?
But
what about making a?
They would take a healthy liver that's matchable with the kids, because obviously the kids has a deficiency.
Don't change the scenario though. Like I agree, you're correct. But in that scenario, if they did that, would it be?
In that scenario, that's unethical as hell.
Correct, I agree.
Okay, what about a slightly different scenario?
That's not how that works. You don't get to create someone just to hurt them or kill them.
Agreed.
But a clone can be viewed as not a person.
I disagree with the notion that they're not people, because I haven't heard a good enough argument to why they're not people.
Okay, what
if
if
you're people? Then you can't. Then you're not doing.
That's what I'm saying. No, if they might not. Like, if you could convince me that they're not people, maybe I'd feel that way. But as far as I'm concerned, they're people.
I mean,
if they're people, then their arguments are moot, because then you just treat their person. It's
Yeah, Bruce says they're not people. They don't have a soul.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that they're a person. Obviously, you have a disagreement. That's it. I'm looking at it from the viewpoint that they are people. You're looking at it from the viewpoint.
Hey, wait. See, this is the confusion, guys. This is the confusion.
They're not people.
Persons is the plural of person, not people.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, why are we doing this legal semantics jump around?
No, that's not legal. That's just definitions.
He is right about that.
Because we're talking about personhood. You can't just say people.
Language is how you use it, and I think that everybody.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
What we're talking about.
That's why I'm fucking correcting you, and you're rejecting my correction.
I don't think it needs to be clarified because we all know what we're talking about in the room here. I don't think it needs to be clarified. If
you're all misunderstanding what's being said, though. That's why I'm correcting you guys, all of you.
Wait.
Like none of you know this.
Webster says that the most common plural of person is people.
Okay.
So, I mean, while I agree with you that it may be persons, I think it's just like their vernacular may shift around.
But we are. That's colloquial. That's colloquial. Okay. Sorry. Okay. But we are talking about personhood. That's why I'm bringing it up in the discussion. Okay. It's discussion. Yeah, it's germane. It's germane to the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It is relevant.
I think we all understand how we're using it, and I don't think we need to do. But I guess it is germane to the discussion. I'll do that.
Is a leprechaun a person?
See.
Yes. Well, they don't exist. So.
Agree.
That's
shit.
I have missed something.
If you capture a leprechaun, you can own that shit for as long as you die. As long as you.
I'm pretty sure the deal.
Leprechauns on this one. It's kind of funny.
Irish people are anyway, so. Irish people are.
Regardless, was it besides the personhood thing we're having here? So the difference in personhood that we're arguing, at least between Bruce and I, is that I believe that they're person. Does that feel better?
Wait, I said they're not. Bruce, I have a question for you, if you don't mind. Do you think Adolf Hitler has a soul?
Adolf Hitler? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, correct.
Yeah, what a great God creation we have.
Well, I mean,
but it must be. So I see. Okay, so his point is that if God can create Adolf Hitler, it's probably not much worse than what we're going to make when we decide to make people. Like, we're probably going to do better than that.
Okay.
Which honestly, if that's the case, if God started making people, and one of those people is Adolf Hitler, I think we could do better than that. So,
absolutely,
in a case, that means that we're doing better than God in an aspect.
I don't think that's true.
We can purposely create someone better than what God does on a random chance.
Okay, what if we cloned Adolf Hitler?
Is it a
cloning
person?
Adolf Hitler? Cloning Adolf Hitler wouldn't be morally incorrect.
This is interesting.
This is unfair. Because it's
Can an animal have personhood?
Who has the same flaws that every other person has. Jeffrey Dahmer, Adolf Hitler, they all have defects, problems, influences, all of the above. So if it's a person, they're subject to the same moral failures that Adolf Hitler is.
What distinguishes?
So it's not as though people are creating, unless you're saying we've cloned people and they'll no longer make bad decisions. Okay, well now you've totally changed the scenario.
No, wait, I'm still trying to understand what is the distinguishing factor that makes somebody, like the clone, not a person. What makes them not a person?
That I haven't been able to hear that directly. What is it, Bruce?
What that makes them not a person?
Correct.
If they're created in such a way that they're not created, if they're not created in the way that human beings are created by default now, right? Whether it's artificial insemination or if it's natural birth, okay, and they're fabricated, then they're not human beings.
So they're animals.
They're not
what are we talking about today?
Guys, I want to introduce some people to the room real quick. We've got Cameron.
Good.
We got Kapow that just joined.
These are my friends. I brought them from another server here because
there's a lot of people.
So Adam's girl, this is Maddie, and then we have the Baron over here. He's Adrian, and then we have let's see. Yeah, so we got I added some people to our discussion.
I found Waldo.
Excellent. Was it so? Adams, I'll start with you. There was it. What do you think ethically about about reproductive and therapeutic?
About what?
Reproductive and therapeutic cloning.
Reproductive and therapeutic cloning. I am religious, so you ready?
Sure.
Don't mess with God's design or create clones because in a way it's creating a false prophet because you're not the real thing.
Hey man,
right?
hey, who is this?
So I'd actually like to talk about that verse there. When that verse about becoming a prophet of nations, that was talking about a very specific person. That wasn't talking that every person is a prophet of nations when they're born. They were talking about that specific guy. So when you're born, you aren't necessarily a prophet of nations just by virtue of being born. So I don't think that works that way.
Well, I just think that God made you who you are. There's no need to clone.
Sure. All right.
Why did God make us available to clone? You know.
Well, one second. Okay, so is that all your is that your thought on that? What about therapeutic cloning?
May I offer a contrapuntal argument?
I want to talk about therapeutic cloning with her real quick. After that, you can.
Can I say something? I just want to let you know that we did come from an anti-circumcision server, so just want to point that out there.
Oh, okay. Ooh. So I want to. Okay, so what about therapeutic cloning? When you take you don't clone an entire organism, but let's say somebody's in line for a heart transplant and they're not going to get it, but they can have a heart clone, and then that can be given to the person, and then they now have a new heart. How do you feel about that?
That's fine because it's a part. Okay. Yeah, that's fine as long as it's not the entire. As long as it doesn't create an entire. When you create an entire whole. Yeah, whenever, as long as you don't create...
Cloning foreskin.
What about a pig heart?
Yikes.
Okay, that's fine. However, whenever you create an entire human being by yourself, you are therefore creating an entire soul, an entire entity, and I have a problem with that.
But if God created a person and that person created another person, isn't that God's creation?
I want to know, is it, let's see, where's it at? I love this.
It should be created naturally and holistically.
Is one of the tenets of most religions to become closer to their God?
Yes.
Okay, so in what way would you getting closer to God than also being somebody who creates? Being a being that's capable of manipulating and creating life, would that not bring you closer to your God and being more like him in a way? Wouldn't that make you want to be more in his light and therefore seen as though of him you are made of him?
Be fruitful and multiply.
But technically, we're multiplying by cloning people.
But Adam's girl, what do you think about that?
So you're talking, but I don't hear anything.
Yeah, you were roboting severely, so I'm gonna need you to repeat all of that.
Okay. Here I got it. If I was roboting, I apologize.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and get that through. No
it's
problem.
Okay.
No worries. Let me get that through one more time. So, in the case of, let's see. So, if you want to, if it is the goal of most theists, at least in most major religions, to be closer to their God, would it not be that you are becoming closer to your God by also becoming a creator and manipulator of life and therefore sharing more kinship with your God?
For me, I guess it just freaks me out because I'm already the female version of my father. So, I'm a clone, I guess you would say, with manipulated sex organs by becoming female. So, by me being a female. So I guess, I don't know. I guess it just freaks me out that, my doppelganger basically is my daddy.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting answer. Alrighty, so
so I may
go ahead and pop over
may
to Cameron. Cameron, I'd like to get your thoughts if you're wanting to talk about therapeutic and reproductive cloning. We can go therapeutic first or reproductive first, whichever you.
I'm anti-circumcision, by the way. So
sounds good.
I mean, I just don't see any issue with cloning at all, unless it's like just creating like mental illnesses or any issues like physically for the people that are being cloned or whatever it is. I would consider
Okay, so if you're cool with reproductive cloning like that, then therapeutic cloning's no problem.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, that's a good take. Any further thoughts on that?
I mean, like, I think that if God thought it was wrong, why would it be possible to do?
Interesting. Okay, and then we'll move on over to Baron von Wijik. I think that's how you say that. Baron, are you there?
Yeah, I don't have an opinion because I've never really thought about it before. So
fair enough. I appreciate the honesty.
that.
I really appreciate that. Ooh, L just popped in. What's up, L?
What's up, man?
Hey, man. Let's get you.
Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez. Your voice is like your voice is very, very deep. It's almost scary.
Yeah, that's cool.
What about okay.
I love it though. I love it though.
L is confirmed corpse husband. No, but
all of my friends are extremely honest, like I am. So I just want to put that out there.
Perfect. Is it L? What do
So-
you think? What do you think about the ethics of reproductive and therapeutic cloning?
I think it's
Is
fine.
it ethical or not? Do those things?
It depends on the fundamental motivation. So
Okay, we usually that's where we've gotten in most of the conversations that mellows down to what your intent is or what your motivation is for these clones. Okay, so keep going.
yeah. It's to be honest with you, I can't reasonably conceive of any way it could be bad. I can't even. You could say, well, the rich would sort of have a monopoly on that, but like everything else, right? I don't know. So
I think for the first little while, for sure, it would be like a very cost prohibitive, especially when the technology just came out. So I don't disagree with you there. I really badly must use the restroom, so I'd like you guys to have an open discussion on this one. Can be right back.
Everyone just scream into the mic while Jack's gone.
Well, I am.
monkey.
All I gotta say is I am waiting on the circumcision argument because I am locked and loaded.
Well, actually,
Well,
I think
first
you'll
I
find that
wanted
most
to
people
offer
here.
some.
I think you'll find most people here are in agreement with you. I think most people are pretty anti-circumcision, including myself as a reformed fundamentalist Christian.
I actually the reason my mom is actually pro circumcision, and so I actually have verses in the Bible to back up my statement, and I actually have I've talked to rabbis, I've talked to preachers, I've talked to
No argument from me.
about this topic. I've talked to all three, fundamental
do you know about David Reimer? The guy
circumcision
who
has
got,
like a lot of benefits though.
the guy who got whose dick got burned because he was at 2 weeks old because he was trying to get circumcised, and so he got raised as Brenda Reimer. He got raised as a girl for 14 years because of that. Do you know about that story? You don't know about that?
Do what?
There's a Jewish guy back in the I think the late 90s. He was 2 weeks old and he was.
Do what?
Oh, okay.
You're frozen as hell.
I think it's an issue.
I'm hearing fine.
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
Yeah. I said there's
Well, hey,
What does everybody think? Hillbilly in the chat says, "Is a cloned banana a banana, or is it something different? Is it now no longer a banana, or is it?"
I'd ask him this question: Is a banana a banana?
A banana, as far as we're able to tell, is a banana.
But how do you know that a banana is a banana and
Because
not some
as far as we're able to tell.
simulacrum of a banana
It could
that
be.
fools
That's
your senses?
what a clone would be to people who don't think that clones would be clones. So if a clone was there, it would be a simulacrum of a banana. But if we just have a banana, it'd be a banana. See how people think that?
How do I know?
Well, it looks like a banana. It smells like a banana, but might not be a banana.
Most things that walk like a duck, quack like a duck, and fly like a duck.
It's a banana-looking object.
What if it's
Is
a
it really
plantain?
It could be a plantain is not too genetically different from a banana, so
Right?
I would go ahead and say it's fine.
Banana.
Is it on?
A plantain.
Okay, no, but so where are we at here?
I'm glad I didn't say
Everybody's
that.
giving their general opinions on it, so I just want to see. Bruce, we'll come back to you because I think you've got
Well, okay, I
you've
wanted
got
to
one of the best
offer.
takes. You and Adam's girl probably have the best takes in here, just being religious.
I wanted to offer an argument against what you was talking about the false prophet.
Oh, do you? Okay, go ahead, Fateh.
So earlier you said if somebody was cloned, that they wouldn't be. I was arguing a little bit with Bruce about this earlier, following the same guidelines. But to quote the verse that you were quoting. So God told Jeremiah, "Before I formed you, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you, and I appointed you a prophet to the nations." So this is talking about predestination, right? So if you
Amen.
I'm sorry?
I said amen. Go ahead.
All right, right. So if God really created the world and preordained certain events or everything, right? Then how would creating things using His creation be something against His will, or would be something against His, or would be how would you be capable of creating something that was against God's will? Basically, how would you be capable of creating a false prophet, as you put it, which I don't think is biblically supported? I don't think you can create a false prophet using cloning technology or anything like that.
I just think it should come from God naturally, from the Almighty. I just think it should come from the Almighty.
But if he gave us these tools and He gave us the understanding, then it does come from the Almighty.
I actually have something to interpret in this. So, do you, in the case of that, you think it should the idea of the statement, it should come from the Almighty? Do you think that like insulin isn't okay then because it didn't come from God? Or like see, well, there's the thing, it didn't come from the Almighty. It's something we created more. Like what about a polio vaccine? That didn't come from God. We had to create something to get rid of that. That didn't come from the Almighty, but it's something that was necessary for us to physically create and make happen for us to live and thrive as a species.
Yeah.
So what about so the statement that it's got to come from the creator, or it's got to come from the Almighty? It just kind of falls a little to the wayside on that. But what are your thoughts?
I guess I'm not educated, I guess I would say, enough on the particular subject. But for me, cloning, all I gotta say is there's a lot of people that we shouldn't be cloning at all. Like, I can name a few people. All I gotta say is Vladimir Putin. That is somebody we should not be cloning at all. So that's why I'm against it for now.
He might actually be a clone.
Oh my.
Of Jesus Christ.
Oh, yes.
That's not fair, dude. You can't just pop in and blast it like
Base Travis.
No.
Yeah, he's a big believer in God. I mean, maybe he is Jesus Christ.
No,
His
okay,
second the second coming, right?
Bruce,
That's a good point.
if I were to ask the same
And what he's doing is carrying out God's will.
And my lip is bleeding. I bit a piece of skin. Ow. Now I know how you feel whenever you guys are born. At least a little bit.
That's not funny at all.
That's not funny.
I think we should make a lot of Vladimir Putins in the laboratory. Actually,
I agree.
I think he's a strong man.
I think that if due to the way that cloning works, I think that if you clone Vladimir Putin and you didn't raise him in the exact same way that Vladimir Putin was raised, he would be a completely different person. So it's okay.
Yeah.
You can clone Vladimir Putin in that way. That's fine. But Bruce, if I raise those same questions to you, what do you have? What would you think?
The questions around what, like insulin versus cloning or something?
But more like the polio vaccine specifically. The insulin one isn't as good as polio vaccine. Like it should come from God, and we've got stuff like the polio vaccine to keep us all from having.
Yeah, I mean, I see. Like I said. So in the case of any of this, I see that as by the grace of God. Even a clone that is created. Like I said, if it is created in the same way that people are created, meaning birth with specific personhood, which they do, if they're created in the image of God, which artificial insemination would be in that category. I don't have any qualms with that.
Yeah, I feel like the only disconnect is the disconnect that we have between that and like what would be considered a test tube baby. I can't figure out where there would be a loss in there.
Okay. Can I say the gay perspective here?
Sure, go ahead.
Because I speak for all gay people.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Well, I mean, unless someone wants to out themselves, but it hasn't happened yet on this server. So,
Don't out me.
I'm on the spectrum, man. So,
I'm on the spectrum, he said.
In case.
Can you paint with all the colors?
I don't discriminate. I don't discriminate between men or women or whatever you want to say.
You're attracted to his nipples at the moment.
Men, women, goats, dogs.
Right.
Exactly.
Here's the thing.
Nipples.
Here is the thing. Gay men have been confused for a long time and mistaking the anus as a vagina, and that's not how you get someone pregnant, okay? So we're going to have to do some cloning types of things, okay? If we want to have a baby.
That does actually put an interesting topic in spells.
Bruce,
Now you could
can
actually
we get Bruce's response?
No, hold on. You can take two men's DNA, combine it, and have a baby.
I'm not surprised.
Therefore, you could actually have a baby from two different types of DNA for men, and therefore it would be the actual child of that couple, which I think is fucking awesome that they'd be able to have that child.
Well, the reason why I think about this is because it all comes back to wait a second. It all comes back to and making the frogs gay. And who is the gayest frog? Jar Jar Binks.
Jones.
Jar Jar Binks.
I was gonna say.
like, what about like the plight of like something like that, where they're a non-human? You know, like when we're like, I know we're talking about humans here, but like, what about his species? Like, you know, if he's like the last of the Gongans, like, and then all he has left is his leader that he reports to, that big fat like Zoro looking dude. Yeah, King Zoro dude. Like, how the fuck is he going to continue his species? How the fuck are we going to continue the orangutans?
They actually they have brought one extinct species back to life. Unfortunately, it as it is right now, it did not live too long.
Fortunately, Misa don't know.
It hasn't lived. It didn't get to live too long. What's it called? It's called
it seems to be the
Ricardo was an extinct animal brought back by cloning that died due to a lung deficiency. But it's unknown whether or not it was the cloning or the particular animal that they had gotten the DNA from that had the lung deficiency. So
if we are able to clone but yet they only live, you know, like 3 to 5 years, is it okay to use them as weapons?
No. Oh gosh. I don't know.
I would say because no, it wouldn't be viable because you'd still have to have them grow to like full adult and then use them as whatever weapons you were doing. That would be just so ineffective to just using weapons we already have or robots or something. It's too long of a process.
You're ruining my sci-fi fantasy.
I know I am. And
by the way, I see that you have a Patreon.
Trav.
Travis.
That is correct.
What do you guys do?
Pangburn is all about producing opportunities for people to engage in intellectual discourse like we're doing here today.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, how much is it per month?
$1 million a month. But that can be paid in 2 installments.
Can it be paid?
I'm just kidding.
In clones?
I'm just
or
kidding.
Baby
Every little bit helps, but it's completely free to be a part of these discussions. So if you do enjoy the brand, there's a lot of ways you can support the brand. You can do it through Patreon, or you can go to our website, pang-burn.com/subscription, and become a website sub. Lots of different ways.
I really enjoyed these conversations. I really enjoyed the intellectual diversity within here.
Awesome.
Really cool.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you found the server, and welcome to all the new people.
Thank you. I also have a server.
Thanks for the
referral.
Diversity is our strength.
I have 2 different servers. I have the Mad Militia for Men server. It is a men's rights server where basically I am a Christian wanting to recreate and reshape the way that we talk about men's rights from a Christian perspective. And And so basically we're going to be doing men's rights with a messianic message.
Amazing.
And so
Wait, that was a Jesse Lee.
It's a mess.
That was a great drop. Go ahead. Sorry.
Any kinds of men's
I
rights,
also have.
I advocate for it.
Huh?
I said I advocate for all men's rights as well. I agree with that. So I don't care how it comes. All men's rights are great. Fighting.
And then I have another one that's a personal server, and I call it the Madhouse, and it gets pretty crazy in there. So,
What can I just for my curiosity, Adam's girl? What's your faith denomination?
I have no believe it or not, I actually have no denomination. I'm a lover of Jesus Christ.
What do you have, a confession of faith or statement of faith?
I believe that we are all sinners, and so we are constantly striving.
Hey guys, real quick, I want to thank, real quick, I don't mean to interrupt everybody. I want to thank everybody for joining up on the live part of the Hangout. I want everybody to go ahead and go to the YouTube video real quick and drop a like and subscribe to the channel of Pangburn. If you could all do that, that'd be friggin' fantastic so we can get more noticeability in there. But we are going to start moving this conversation down to Trav's Tavern. After that, we're going to pop off the live right here. So if everybody can go ahead and start heading out that. Thank you for joining. Everybody on YouTube, please join the Discord. Please go on to the Patreon. Check out that. We're going to be doing a new type of video next week, so we're going to put out an announcement for that a little bit later. I appreciate everybody that's come in here. Everybody just pop down to the tavern. We're going to continue the conversation, have like a little bit more of a exciting conversation because of the limitations of YouTube. However, I thank everybody for being here. I enjoyed my first show. I'm happy everybody could show up. We had such a great discussion. I was super duper nervous about this, so I'm really, really happy it went well.
You're awesome.